finding new ways to help the homeless. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the conversation. I'm David Schuster. The state of California, which has the largest homeless population in the United States, has just unveiled a new, very expensive proposal to essentially compel more people with psychiatric disorders and addictions into court-ordered cases. This would include some medication and housing, but there's some questions about the proposal. Here to talk about that is Mary Thoreau. She's the senior vice president of the Independent Institute. She's also host of the documentary Beyond Homeless. Mary, first of all, what's your reaction to what California Governor Newsom is trying to do?
Well, it's certainly a part of a big puzzle, but it's also something of a fire, ready, aim mandate. We need resources first, and then we can figure out how to get people to access those resources.
Does it make sense, though, for the state of California to require, in some capacity, some institution to have responsibility to make sure that people who need psychiatric care can actually get it, as opposed to just being shuffled either into some sort of prison system or sent back out on the street?
Well, there certainly need to be facilities, and there are some people who are not capable of making the decision themselves to access care. Very limited people who need that. But again, we need a whole range of resources available for people who are having mental illness problems, and they simply do not currently exist. So we need to start with that.
And let's start with, if you had your wish list, and let's first talk about priorities in terms of, should this be a state issue? Should this be a county issue? Who would you prefer to tackle this?
Well, really, this is a problem. The homelessness problem as a whole cannot be solved by DC or Sacramento or even by City Hall. It really is a community-wide problem. The more we've looked into places that have dealt with homeless problems successfully, we see that it's every part of their community working very effectively together, strategically, systemically, to address the many, many individual causes that put people into homelessness in the first place, and the many, many resources that are needed for those individuals to transform their lives and get out of homelessness.
What are some of these specific tools? And let's just, for argument's sake, let's assume that there is this sort of system-wide efficiency that everybody's aiming for. What is it that, in terms of the first priority, in terms of these resources that could help a community in trying to figure out how to deal with this?
Well, we don't have to assume it. Our documentary, Beyond Homeless, Finding Hope, actually has an extensive case study of where it has been achieved. And that's in Bexar County, Texas, and they've been doing it for 11 years with remarkable success. The first step is to bring every sector of the community together. You need the business community, government, obviously, you need community activists, you need all of the fire, police, EMS, and importantly, all of the nonprofits that are involved who are currently working mostly in silos. And they all need to come together, coordinate, develop a strategy, and then execute on that strategy. And again, we have a very good model of it working extremely well that other communities could easily replicate. They just need to stop thinking, well, City Hall is going to solve this or Sacramento is going to solve this, and understand that no, it's something that we all need to work together as a community to solve.
And I get that breaking down the silos, even in a particular community, can be very challenging. But assuming that a community is able to break down the silos and you're able to bring all these people to the table to deal with this, then what? What's the next step?
Well, then you execute on it. So certainly in Bexar County, they did it as a campus-wide model. Every nonprofit in the community offices there and provides resources there. The police are very integrated with it. It's an independently run organization that's therefore accountable to donors, to taxpayers, and to the community at large.
There was an effort in San Francisco, I think in the last 2 years, a proposal to try to create something like 6,000 beds for homeless. I think San Francisco's now, housing about 3,700 people. Is that a helpful start? In other words, for a city to say, look, these are the number of beds that we're going to have built, regardless of the system in terms of keeping track of people and bringing all these shareholders together. Having that sort of goal, is that helpful?
Well, beds alone is not going to solve the problem because all you do is put someone inside and they're still dealing with their problems. So you have to have the resources that address why they fell into homelessness in the first place. Otherwise, history shows that they usually just fall out of the housing back into the street. So it's a vicious circle. The other problem with starting with beds is so-called permanent supportive housing is incredibly expensive, especially here in California. I mean, it starts at $500,000 per unit, and some of these developments are going up to $900,000 a unit. So there's simply not enough resources for the 161,000 people in California experiencing homelessness. If you just do it with beds, it's $80 billion. And then you have nothing left to provide the services that they need to resolve their problems and stay housed and stay on track to live independently.
You mentioned the 161,000 homeless as of, I guess, 2020, the last time there was a survey, I suppose, or analysis done. Has the reason for most homelessness, has that changed over the decades?
Homelessness is incredibly individualized, and people keep trying to make it a homogenous problem, and it really isn't. There are as many reasons for becoming homeless as there are individuals who experience homelessness. And that's why you need a really individualized approach for it. A lot of it, yes, is rooted in childhood trauma, but there are lots of other causes. Being hospitalized as an adult, certainly mental illness is a problem. Economics is a problem. The cost of housing in California is a problem. All of these things are problems, but you can't just say, okay, it's just housing. So all we have to do is provide housing and the problem's solved. It isn't. We have to deal with what's your story? What do you need to get out of homelessness? And have those resources available to each individual.
40 or 50 years ago, there was this sort of prevailing theory that a lot of homelessness was because, I guess in the 1960s, early 70s, a lot of these psychiatric institutions across the United States, in part because of terrible living conditions, were closed. And a lot of people who had a place or a campus or an institution to go to were suddenly on their own and out on the streets. Is that still a prevailing theme for a lot of people in that as well? There's just not enough psychiatric resources, psychiatric institutions for people to go to?
So it's correct that in 1963, JFK closed down most state mental hospitals, and it wasn't a bad decision. A lot of the state mental hospitals were not good places, and we're not advocates for locking people up to make them better. The problem is that nothing was created to replace that. So people were closed out of where they had been with nowhere to go and no services. It certainly is true today, continues to be true today, that there are inadequate psychiatric services and there are inadequate range of psychiatric services available. And then you can deal with getting the motivations for getting people into those services. But we do not have adequate psychiatric care of any kind here.
And whether it's trying to get adequate psychiatric care or simply trying to funnel resources in an efficient way and maybe identifying people and personalizing the resources for them, how much more complicated has it all become over the last 2 years because of the pandemic?
I don't think the pandemic has made that in particular more complicated. They've done a lot of housing people in hotels over the years, and that hasn't been a good experience. It isolates people, and we've seen a huge spike in overdoses in the period. So that's not a good solution. But it's not really a complication for this. You can have congregate settings that are safe. Haven for Hope in San Antonio, the model I was talking about in Texas, has continued to operate extremely effectively. And they deal with mentally ill as well as every other issue behind homelessness and do so very well.
For people who are not police or mental health workers or essentially in the field, so to speak, but are obviously aware of homelessness and want to do something, what are some of the lessons from, say, Texas that an ordinary citizen can draw upon as far as their own effort and their own life and their own community to try to make a difference?
Yeah, I organize and try to outreach and get together with others. That's what we're trying to do with our film and initiative Beyond Homeless, is to empower ordinary citizens to get together in their communities, engage with nonprofits, government, again, EMS and so on, and start having these conversations of, hey, here's a model. How can we apply those lessons to our neighborhood, to our city, to our state, and so on? And individuals are incredibly powerful. Haven was the original idea of one person, but it only came to fruition because he then got together with the city, the county, the nonprofits, and the community organizers, and so on. So anybody can instigate it, but the important thing is to get together with your community to make it happen.
And speaking of instigating, I mean, a lot of the media will have people believe in New York or Los Angeles that homelessness is horrible compared to how it was just a few years ago, that the streets are just rampant with people who are homeless. Has it really gotten that much worse, or is that just sort of a media misnomer?
I'm afraid that in San Francisco, it is most certainly true. I have spent a lot of time in the Tenderloin, which is kind of ground zero in San Francisco for where the homeless have traditionally sort of been shuttled. And I'm just amazed at how much worse it is now, which led the mayor about a month ago to declare the neighborhood to be an emergency. It's gotten extremely dystopian.
And what caused that? Or is there a simple cause or an explanation for that?
A lot of it is it's just been left unchecked. So people have gotten a lot more brazen about open drug use. The fentanyl, certainly we've had a huge stream of fentanyl come in, and fentanyl is a horrible, horrible drug that's had a very negative impact on the whole scene. But really, it's just a matter of we need to get in there and work with the individuals and help them.
Mary Thoreau, she's the Senior Vice President for the Independent Institute. Again, the documentary is Beyond Homeless. Mary is the host of that. And again, it's an important issue, as we've heard in many cities. It is a growing problem, and certainly a lot of people are more concerned about trying to find some creative ways to make our communities more efficient in terms of how we tackle all this. Mary, thanks so much for joining us. We appreciate it, and good luck to you.
Thank you so much for inviting me.
Could Russia's Vladimir Putin use tactical nuclear weapons? Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the conversation. I'm David Schuster. As the Russian invasion of Ukraine grinds on, and it does seem like Russian troops are in something of a quagmire, good news for the Ukrainians and perhaps for the West that is supplying them. But there are some people in Washington and around the world who are actually losing a lot of sleep over whether Vladimir Putin might decide to stop just using artillery shells on civilian areas and escalate with weapons that are more powerful and dangerous, like a nuclear weapon, in order to send a message and perhaps force some sort of surrender from the Ukrainians. Here to talk about that is Matt Schwartz. He's a senior correspondent for Insider. He's written about this. Matt, first of all, your reaction to the war so far?
It's terrible. I mean, I'm very far away from it, but some of the images and personal accounts that I've seen and read are some of the most horrifying things that I've witnessed at a distance in my life. And I'm also unclear why it seemed like it was a totally unnecessary and unprovoked decision by Russia to go and do this. So the thing is very sad and hard to see how it's going to end well for anyone.
Agree with you on all counts. But as far as the Ukraine's courage, the bravery, I suppose the surprise, I mean, they're putting up the kind of fight that even Vladimir Putin could not have expected. Are you surprised by that?
I mean, I'm not a military expert. It's clear the Russians were surprised, and it's clear this wasn't something they were prepared for. It's clear that they had built up a force that was was operating under the political assumption that they would be greeted as liberators and would be able to take Kiev quickly, and that Putin underestimated the desire of even ethnic Russian-speaking Ukrainians. Those people still want an independent Ukraine, it seems. I mean, they've been making that quite clear, and that was one of Vladimir Putin's assumptions going in. It appears that this would be a lot easier than it's turned out.
There is this assessment among Western intelligence agencies that the Russians have a slightly different view about the use of a tactical nuclear weapon than the West would have. I wonder if you can expand on that.
Sure. So when people talk about nuclear war, they usually think of like something like, Hiroshima, Nagasaki. The U.S. is the only country that used nukes. Hydrogen bombs that we have now are far more powerful than those bombs. So people think of like these intercontinental ballistic missiles, which is what we saw in Dr. Strangelove, which basically would herald the apocalypse. But there's actually a second class of nuclear weapons, tactical nuclear weapons, that are smaller, that can be used on the battlefield, that can be used to take out a military installation or an airport, and can be used. They're still nuclear weapons, and they still have radiation and other drastic effects. They've never actually been deployed or they've been deployed in war, but they've never actually been used. And that is, and Russia has a lot of them. They can be fired from artillery, dropped from planes. They can be fired from submarines. And this is something that Putin could conceivably do to turn things around and show his seriousness. And that's even an option that's officially recognized in some documents by Russian military doctrine, that if we're losing, we can use tactical nukes to turn things around for ourselves on the battlefield. That's like an option we're serving for ourselves.
And is it a stretch, therefore, that if Russia finds its current options are not working, that the ground invasion, that the artillery, the rocket fire, the bombs, traditional bombs dropped from aircraft are not causing the Ukrainians to surrender, are not interrupting the supply lines? Is it that much of a stretch to think that, okay, maybe Russia then escalates and uses a tactical nuclear weapon to take out an area where the supply lines are bringing in things for the Ukrainian army, or to take out a city and say, okay, we've been bombing civilian areas with artillery fire. Now we're going to increase the damage to you. It is time to surrender.
I don't think it's a stretch. It doesn't mean that he definitely will do it. The doctrine is called escalate to de-escalate. And Bill Burns, the CIA director, actually mentioned it in the worldwide threats hearing, I think yesterday. So it's certainly one of the few escalatory options that Putin has left that still, could potentially be appealing. And what would NATO do if it just happened on Ukrainian soil and there weren't any effects to any NATO ally? I mean, we've gotten every indication that NATO wouldn't necessarily do very much in response to that. Although it would really be a global shock. I mean, it'd be the first time the nuclear weapon has been used in war since World War II.
Do you think that's the right policy? In other words, I know that there are a lot of people in Washington who are gaming this out, and a lot of people in Brussels at NATO who are trying to figure this out. What happens if Vladimir Putin uses a tactical nuclear weapon? And if, let's suppose it is contained just to Ukraine, okay, maybe there's worldwide condemnation, but there's not a response in kind. Is that the right approach?
I mean, it's a really, really hard situation. I think people have been trying to figure out, okay, how can we be certain that this won't escalate into World War III, into nuclear war? There is no way to reduce that risk to zero so long as nuclear weapons exist. And I think so far, NATO has been very clear about what they won't do, and taking options off the table has been a means to attempt to de-escalate the conflict. And from where I sit, that hasn't worked. And it doesn't mean that NATO should escalate, but I'm not sure that they should be so upfront about things that they won't do. In response to a Russian escalation.
A lot of people, when they hear the potential, even of tactical nuclear weapons being used by the Russians, think, oh my God, Vladimir Putin must just be crazy. But there's also this argument that it's not that he's insane, but that he is so shrewd that he just doesn't look at nuclear weapons with the same sort of horror that the rest of the world does. Where do you come down in terms of Vladimir Putin's stability or sanity, per se?
I think any person who's accumulated that amount of personal power and held on to it for that long is going to become a very strange individual, very different from you or me in terms of like how people around them respond to them, how much pushback are they getting, how much quality information are they getting. We see this in the United States in a much, much, much smaller way with, CEOs or someone like Harvey Weinstein. Power just makes people monstrous. Now, is Putin insane? He's clearly presented a consistent, although abhorrent narrative about why he's doing this. He's got his two imaginary people's republics, which he's recognized in the East, and he claims that he's conducting a limited military operation in order to defend them against potential Ukrainian aggression. So he's tried to be transparent and explain his justifications as ridiculous as they sound to me. So he's not just sort of making this up as he goes along. He's just rationally pursuing a very unpalatable and horrific set of goals through even more horrific means at times, as we saw today, with the bombing of the hospital in Mariupol.
You mentioned the escalate to de-escalate sort of doctrine, military policy or doctrine the Russians have. Is that widely shared and agreed upon within the Russian military?
It's controversial. There are some U.S. analysts who say that it is a figment of the U.S. imagination. However, the U.S. officially did mention this doctrine in their nuclear posture review in 2019, and we did hear the CIA director Bill Burns, who's a Biden guy, not a Trump guy, or was appointed by Biden mentioned it yesterday. So it's something that U.S. analysts take seriously, although it's hard to know exactly how the Russian military and Putin really thinks about their tactical nukes. It's hard to imagine that any battlefield commander would be authorized to use a weapon like that for the first time ever without Vladimir Putin's.
You see any sort of off ramp for Vladimir Putin? I mean, everybody tries to talk about, okay, what's the way that Vladimir Putin for himself can somehow save face, can say, okay, I've achieved, or can say to his people, we've achieved some of our goals. We've done enough in Ukraine. It's time to withdraw. What does that look like?
Yeah, people say that that there's a sort of this conventional wisdom that there's no off ramp for him. I don't think it's very likely that you'll see a negotiated peace settlement, but I think the chances of that happening have risen from 0 to maybe like the low single digits % chance. And the reason I say that is if you track Russia's demands over time, they've actually gotten a lot smaller as at the negotiating table from the first to the second to the third round, and they're coming in. They're almost within arm's reach now of Zelensky and his party's position. Russia's asking for recognition of these breakaways, the Crimea, and they're asking for no NATO and no EU for Ukraine written into the Constitution. Now, the Constitution stuff, the EU thing, those are still blocks, but we're now in sort of the universe of stuff that Zelensky's talked about. The question is whether Russia's even negotiating in good faith, whether they would abide by a peace agreement, whether they're just going to these negotiations to buy time on the battlefield. And it's hard to know that, especially looking back at their conduct in Syria, whether this is just all a gambit or whether they're serious about peace. But I don't think it's impossible that you can see a negotiated end to this in the short term. But I also don't think it's very likely.
And the misinformation, of course, is remarkable. If you look at Russian media and what they are sort of reporting or being told, at a certain point, one would imagine that the number of Russian casualties will start to sort of filter back and people become aware. As far as the nuclear threat, tactical nuclear weapons, I would imagine that the United States and NATO have all sorts of satellite eyes across the country. In other words, the West will know if, in fact, Vladimir Putin uses a tactical nuclear weapon, I assume, right?
That's right, but it isn't hard. I don't want to speculate too much, but it's very easy to imagine a scenario where Russia says that it was Ukraine that used a tactical nuke, and that Russia just now has to respond with tactical nukes of its own. Because Russia has constantly been trying to drum up the myth that Ukraine has, some kind of weapons of mass destruction. So there might be confusion and competing narratives. I mean, they tried to do that before the invasion, but the U.S. intelligence community took those pretexts away. So they just invaded, for the sake of invading because they didn't have a pretext. But I think if they used a tactical nuke, it would be tempting to sort of build an alternative storyline around it and their alternative reality.
Yeah, certainly. I mean, as you mentioned, they said that it was Ukraine that was trying to acquire nuclear weapons just a couple of weeks ago, and the Russians were putting their nuclear forces, on a higher level of alert in response to that. Well, it is a frightening situation in all sorts of ways. Are you optimistic or pessimistic about how this ends?
I mean, I don't know. It's hard not to be pessimistic, I guess. There's a lot of things that could keep this going for a while. I mean, Putin has to deliver some kind of victory or something he can sell as a victory. And I don't think the Ukrainians are going to start fighting anytime soon. A couple of big questions in my mind are whether Putin would be content with some of Ukraine or whether he needs to have all of it, and also whether he would consider Kiev to be negotiable. If there's any universe where he would recognize or accept a Zelensky-led government in Kiev, is that compatible with any of the war in any universe in his view or not? And I just don't know.
Matt Schwartz is a senior correspondent with Insider. Matt, good of you to join us. Thanks for doing this.
Oh, sure. Thank you, David. It's a pleasure. Anytime.
You got it. And on behalf of Gina Kim, Asher Cofield, and Craig Lowry, I'm David Schuster. Thanks for watching.
You know, Old School's pitched to me from Jank. It'll just be me, you, Jesus, Ben, and maybe Michael. And we're like, okay, cool. I can do that every week. As you can see, me, Jesus, Ben.
When you make the order, it says, don't exceed $20.01. So I'll just order literally anything to get it as close to that as I possibly can.
I'm sorry that I ordered $45 worth of food and got an email saying, sir, would you like to rethink that? And I go, what are you talking about?
I was in hell. I was just like, oh my God, the theater's empty, nobody's here. Everyone on screen keeps f***ing cursing. Why did I let this happen? And the whole thing looks like it was shot through a glass of milk. My mom's gonna be so mad.
If you're looking for a heart attack, the short way, baby.
Wrong! I did put mayonnaise on it. I'm the most in shape, overweight person you'll find.
That's right.
He was like, why didn't you answer my call? I called you 39 times.
Yuck. But what makes you stop right before 40? What makes you say, nah, man, I ain't doing that no more. I'm cool.
And I called you back on the air. And I was like, okay, Kevin Smith, big shot. What the f***? You said you'd come on and you didn't come on.
I'm sure I took that very well.
Yeah, you did. You called me back the next day and said, I thought it was 7 a.m. There's now deep fake porn. I don't know if you guys have heard of this.
Heard of it? I just had some in the car.
I'll tell you who I'm not f***ing, Ben Mankiewicz. Have you guys ever felt that?
Not ever.
And now it's just the three of us.
This is the intimate hour.
By the way, the last half hour of this, we're not even rolling.
Fair enough.
Hey, man.
Kingsley.
See, I watch movies.
I'm done with both of you.
Once Greg starts laughing, I can't stop. And I was just gonna ask you about getting high.
Snoogans, Snoochie Boochies. And members, of course, you can get the whole damn thing. TYT.com, join and free trial. I'm old school with the old folks.
Good
John,
man.
come back.
This is where it all began for many elected progressive leaders. The Young Turks was one of the few media outlets to cover the races of Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, Jamal Bowman, Cori Bush, Rashida Tlaib, and many, many more. We know a great majority of the country is actually progressive, and TYT is here to amplify these issues so that we can have better policies that a majority of the country actually supports. We want to drive positive change, and then we've been doing that for 20 years here. That's why we're launching Canvas 2022, a campaign to get out the vote and amplify progressive candidates, the progressive agenda, and their primary races. The midterm elections are fast approaching, and we know mainstream media won't cover progressive voices, but because the TYT audience is too strong, we can make a difference in the midterm elections to help progressives get elected and make sure our priorities are heard. Support our mission to drive positive change. Visit tyt.com/canvas2022.
Field goal here. It's time to switch to beer.
Oh, man.
Oh, God.
Do your best.
He's a little like Let's go!
Oh. No one's happy now.
Give him another try.
Oh!
Wow. This is the weirdest game.
Public opinion, your opinion, has zero effect on public policy. The richest people in the country, their opinion has a direct effect.
Leslie Byrne, a Democrat from Virginia, describes that when she went to Congress, she was told by a colleague, quote, always lean to the green. And to clarify, she went on, he was not an environmentalist.
Our government actively serves the richest and the most powerful and turns its back on everyone else.
Finally end the corruption and get money out of politics and give us back our democracy. All right, we're the Young Turks. Cenk Uygur, Chris Marion with you guys. Look, it's a great mood, but of course, mixed news. We will make fun of Republicans in hilarious ways later in the show, so that's fun. Obviously, we have news on the war that's disastrous, but man, they're taking out some Russian tanks. No, I'm like, you're gonna love that video, okay? And so I'll do a little Debbie Downer on that one too, okay? Just sprinkle in a little bit of Debbie Downer. But overall, man, the Russians did not see this coming. And we're gonna explain why too, but a lot to get to, so Casper.
Well, I wanted to start off with some Russian propaganda that is making its way through the internet. It's being amplified by the typical individuals. And I want to address it right away because there is a tiny, tiny, tiny sliver of truth that is being twisted in a way that fits the Russian narrative. So with that said, let's discuss. In its latest propaganda meant to bolster support for the illegal invasion of Ukraine by Russian forces, Russia and its minions are now going around spreading this theory, this idea that Ukraine was developing biological weapons and Putin had no choice but to invade in order to mitigate that threat. Now, we'll tell you a little of who is basically pushing this narrative. We'll give you the reality of what's really happening here. Who made the claims? Well, there are certain Russian officials, including the spokesman for Russia's defense ministry, who said that it was, quote, obvious that in the wake of the special military operation / illegal invasion, the Pentagon started having serious concerns about secret biological experiments uncovered on the Ukrainian territory. There was another Russian official, the Russian deputy United Nations ambassador, who urged Western media on Wednesday to cover the news about secret biological laboratories in Ukraine. Now, here's the problem. These biological research facilities are not a secret. In fact, the US Embassy in Ukraine website is like very open and honest about it. It's published on their website, and I'll give you what the website says in just a second. But here's another individual, the Kremlin spokeswoman, who also told reporters on Wednesday that Russia had concluded that in Ukrainian laboratories close to our borders, components of biological weapons were being developed. Let me be very clear. There is absolutely no evidence of Ukraine developing biological weapons. None. They haven't provided a shred of evidence. And the idea that, I mean, they just keep finding excuses to bolster their illegal invasion into Ukraine, okay? They're denazifying allegedly. Oh, we're liberating the Ukrainians. Now all of a sudden you're hearing about biological weapons. Now, unfortunately, you have the same useful idiots pushing the same narrative. One of those individuals, of course, is Glenn Greenwald. And then you have Republican lawmakers amplifying this messaging. Thomas Massie is one of those Republican lawmakers who said, there's so much propaganda on both sides that I didn't take the concern over Ukrainian biological labs seriously until now. This is a serious admission under oath from a person who would know. Oh, fascinating. Okay, great. Well, what are they using to provide evidence of these biological weapons? Well, there was an exchange between Marco Rubio and the Undersecretary of State, Victoria Nuland. Listen closely to this exchange, and then I will kind of explain what's going on here.
Does Ukraine have chemical or biological weapons?
Ukraine has biological research facilities, which in fact we are now quite concerned Russian forces may be seeking to gain control of. So we are working with the Ukrainians on how they can prevent any of those research materials from falling into the hands of Russian forces should they approach.
I'm sure you're aware that the Russian propaganda groups are already putting out there all kinds of information about how they've uncovered a plot by the Ukrainians to release biological weapons in the country and with NATO's coordination. If there's a biological or chemical weapon incident or attack inside of Ukraine, is there any doubt in your mind that 100% it would be the Russians that would be behind it?
There is no doubt in my mind, Senator, and it is classic Russian technique to blame on the other guy what they're planning to do themselves.
That very last part was accurate because this is a page from the Syria playbook. This is the similar strategy that we saw by the Russians in Syria, where they would claim, oh, the United States is going to accuse us of doing a chemical weapons attack, and then they would do a chemical weapons attack. It's like they would put out a warning in their own propagandistic way. But with that said, let's talk about the difference between biological weapons, which of course there is no evidence of, and biological research facilities, which by the way, exist in most countries, including Russia, including the United States, including China, everywhere, right? So what is it? Well, the website for the US Embassy in Ukraine is very open about this. The US Department of Defense's Biological Threat Reduction Program collaborates with partner countries to counter the threat of outbreaks, deliberate, accidental, or natural, of the world's most dangerous infectious diseases. The program accomplishes its biothreat reduction mission through development of a biorisk management culture, international research partnerships, and partner capacity for enhanced biosecurity, biosafety, and biosurveillance measures. They continue to write about their partnership with Ukraine on this. The biological threat reduction program's priorities in Ukraine are to consolidate and secure pathogens and toxins of security concern, and to continue to ensure Ukraine can detect and report outbreaks caused by dangerous pathogens before they pose security or stability threats. Now, using this as an example or evidence of biological weapons is the same as pointing to nuclear power plants to claim that Ukraine is developing nuclear weapons.
That they're gonna use on Russia.
Yeah, it's just not true, okay? And so, Cenk, I wanna hear what you have to say, and then we'll talk about the parallels with Syria.
Okay, so as responsible people, what you would do in covering this story is say, look, these biological weapons, biological labs exist. They are, as far as we know, as far as anyone knows, they're not making any weapons there. And we read you what the governments are saying as to what they do. Now, there are many labs throughout the world that study pathogens. The overwhelming majority of them are perfectly legitimate. I don't know that any are illegitimate. Is it a good idea to do that? Well, in the pursuit of science, there's good reason to do it, but is it dangerous? Sometimes it is dangerous. So, I've never landed on a conclusion of how COVID broke out in Wuhan in the first place. So it's not like these labs, whether they're in Ukraine or anywhere else, don't pose some level of risk. But in a normal world, about viruses and pathogens, etc. And Anna made a great point. Like, it's the low IQ of Glenn Greenwald, Jimmy Dore, Gray Zone followers are amazing. They just go, did you know that Ukraine has biological labs? And they all go, oh my God, that's it, the Ukrainians are guilty. Of what? They didn't even say that they did anything. They have no evidence of it being used as weapons. They have no evidence of anything. But wait a minute, we have biological labs. And your beloved Russia has biological labs.
Yep.
So if we just turn around and go, did you know Russia has biological labs? I assume those same incredibly low IQ people would be like, oh my God, they're launching the weapons. No, you have to see, what are they doing? Did they do anything? Right. What is it, right?
Well, just to give you a talking point, and I read Greenwald's entire Substack post about this, and what he is implying here is, well, look, I mean, why is Victoria Nuland so concerned about Russia gaining control of these biological research facilities if they're not dangerous? Why are we concerned about Russia seizing control of nuclear power plants?
Exactly.
I mean, he knows, he's not stupid. That's the thing. I mean, look, I referred to Glenn Greenwald as a useful idiot earlier, and I actually want to apologize for that, because Glenn Greenwald is not a useful idiot. He's not an idiot at all. He's certainly useful for a certain narrative that he's been pushing that seems to provide apologism for Russia, regardless of what they do, including their disgusting behavior in Syria involving chemical weapons and the propaganda that they put out about false flags and how chemical weapons weren't actually used against the Syrian people.
Yeah, so I want to get there too. So look, guys, I agree with that in both fronts. Number one, like the Jimmy Dores and Aaron Mates of the world combined have about 3 brain cells. So they're useful idiots, they're chasing money. Jimmy's doing all these stupid videos. Now, I'll give you one quick title to give you a sense of it. Ukraine commits war crime against Russian soldiers. Okay, that's a typical Jimmy Dore video, and his followers are like, oh yeah, Ukraine is guilty for getting invaded. What?
Any mention of the Russian war crimes that are taking place right now, including bombing a children's hospital where 3 people died in Mariupol?
Okay,
any coverage of that? Probably not.
No, they're full-blown propagandists. They're the worst people, but they are genuinely stupid. And I know they're chasing cash, but they're fair to call them useful idiots. Glenn, on the other hand, is smart. That's why I think he's deeply immoral. Glenn, you don't know that simple point about, why are the Russians trying to gain the nuclear reactors? Oh, that could be dangerous. Yeah, nuclear reactors are very, very dangerous. That doesn't mean they're making nuclear weapons. No, you're using it for energy purposes in Ukraine and everywhere else. But it would still be dangerous for them to grab it. These are such obvious points. Only a propagandist and what's sick and sad about Glenn Greenwald is that he used to be a decent person and a decent reporter. And for him to sell his soul like this is one of the most disgusting things I've ever seen. So now back to the expert that we showed you there, the video. I disagree with a part of what she said. She said, no, I'm positive if something were to happen, it would be the Russians. Well, you can't know who did something that didn't happen yet, right? So let's just be clear about that. It doesn't matter how much the other side is doing propaganda. You always have to be fair no matter what, okay? Because this isn't a battle between us and them. It's about what's true and what's not true, okay? So on the other hand, why is she, if I'm guessing why she's so certain, it's because Russia has a very clear pattern of what they do in war. They go and they level civilians, whether it was in Chechnya, Syria, or Ukraine. They do the same exact talking points about, we're opening up humanitarian corridors, and then they bomb, okay? And one of the things that they do almost every time is they commit a biological or chemical attack and they go, the other side did it. Can you believe these powerless people who we invaded and are murdering endlessly are the ones that are guilty of war crimes? Sure. That's never been true because that stuff already happened. We investigated it. And by the way, the gray zones and the Greenwalds have been lying through their teeth about that from the day one. Anna was the first one to expose it. That's why they got so emotional. They're like, oh my God, somebody's actually calling out our obvious lies and propaganda. Well, this is what it was leading to. That's why they're sick people.
Yeah, absolutely. And look, there's been an analysis in regard to which sources are pushing this biological weapons line the hardest. And you have the National Pulse, you have Glenn Greenwald Substack, you have RT, the Gateway Pundit. I mean, come on. It's just, if there's evidence, actual evidence of the Ukrainians developing biological weapons, let us see it. But to point to a research facility to provide credibility to the propaganda coming from the country that has done the illegal invasion, not buying it. I'm sorry. And guys, listen, you don't even have to take our word for it. You do your research. Read exactly what they're citing. A common trick that they did with the chemical weapons attacks in Syria, there were multiple chemical weapons attacks. And so let's say you want to prove that the OPCW report in regard to what happened in Duma indicates that chlorine gas was used, right? What they'll do is they'll show you an OPCW report in regard to a completely different chemical weapon attack. They assume that you're not gonna read what they're citing. Read what they're citing, read it carefully, and ensure that there's actually evidence to bolster whatever their claims are.
Yeah, I mean, for Glenn Greenwald to turn from opposing imperialist, disgusting wars of aggression that Dick Cheney and George Bush launched against Iraq, to supporting disgusting imperialist invasions just because Vladimir Putin is doing it, it's beyond disgusting. But again, this isn't about personalities, guys. What's important is the Ukrainians are being murdered now. They were invaded, no rational person. I mean, it's Trumpian to say with no evidence at all that the Ukrainians are guilty and that the Russians are the innocent ones here. But poor Vladimir Putin, he's just an angel with a soft heart. And they have to defend him against these evil Ukraine. It's disgusting for him to turn into a fanboy of imperialism and war and death and destruction. So I don't care who's doing it. I hate it when America does it, and I hate it when Russia's doing it. But some people apparently have incentives to pick and choose which imperialists they like and which wars of aggression they like and which chemical attacks they'll lie about and biological attacks. By the way, that in Ukraine, let's be super clear. There has been no biological attacks. The Russians didn't do them either, okay? The Ukrainians haven't done them. What you're dealing with right now is the same exact propaganda and playbook that Russia did in Syria. They say, oh, watch out for the other side about to do biological attacks or chemical attacks. And then they launch their own. It's proven conclusively in those cases that the Russians launched it. And then they turn around and go, oh, I can't believe those farmers did that. Yeah, sure. They had well-produced chemical bombs that landed from the air and that they launched with, farmers launched with their own planes.
Right.
I mean, it's just insanity.
Yeah, exactly. And by the way, let me just give you this quick excerpt from The Guardian, because I think that they put it well. The anti-Assad opposition groups that still held northern Syria had heard it all before. From 2015, when Russia took a prominent stake in the conflict, and throughout the gruesome years that followed, claims that they, instead of Assad's regime, had used chemical weapons were a ready-made slur that put them on notice of an imminent assault. So that's the reason why Nuland and the White House is concerned that this is a foreshadowing sign that this could lead to the use of chemical weapons against Ukrainians. Again, that has not happened. There's no evidence of that. But I think considering the pattern that we saw in Syria, there is reason to be concerned.
So last thing, one of the websites that Anna read you about spreading these conspiracy theories that are totally false is Gateway Pundit. Gateway Pundit, if you don't know, is an extreme right-wing site filled to the rim with conspiracy theories and of course about poor Trump got the election stolen, etc. But you just, like even crazier stuff than you've ever seen. Okay, so we told you that the doors and the gray zones and the green walls had gone, and Tulsi Gabbard had gone over to the right wing, and they were publishing things that were identical to extremist right wingers. Now, Gateway Pundit and all those guys are publishing the same things. How could, if you're a progressive, how do you consistently and always agree with the most extreme right wing people in the country? That's because you're a liar. You're not remotely progressive, and stop smearing the name of progressives and just be honest for once in your life and say, yeah, I'm a sick right winger who now loves wars when Putin does it. Just be honest, and we can say, okay, look, we disagree. That's fine. We disagree with Tucker Carlson. We disagree with Glenn Greenwald. Frickin' warmonger doing propaganda for tyrants. That's what you've reduced yourself to, Glenn. You disgust me.
All right, we're gonna take a break, but we have more news about the Russian invasion into Ukraine when we come back.
All right, guys, let's do member comments as usual. But first of all, programming notes. Watch list is on at 9 a.m. Pacific, noon Eastern. It's JR's show, youtube.com/watchlistTYT. All the hot videos in the beginning of the day, boom, you get to see them all. You know what's in the news. It's a great show. And speaking of great shows, Francesca Fiorentini's podcast has been added to the TYT network. That's Habituation Room. Super fun, smart, you know Francesca, check it out. Yes, we have a progressive podcasting network. Yes, you're gonna love it. All right, I'm going to members. Terry writes in, even the fake Russian propaganda news networks are starting to turn on Putin. Well, that's interesting. I haven't seen that. I'm sure you're referring to something there, but if it's happening in Russia, that means Putin is in bigger trouble because a lot of those Russian oligarchs are now hurt and they're having trouble accessing their money. They're being banned all over the world, etc. If you start to see internal dissension that's actually making it into the media in Russia, that means some of the oligarchs that control some of the interests in Russia are beginning to turn on Putin, and that would be a huge development. So hold, I haven't seen it yet. I'll look into it. Dragon with the Girl Tattoo says, Dick Cheney and the Bush administration to Putin, stop copying me. Or I would say, Putin to Dick Cheney, hold my beer. I'll show you how you do invasions all across the world. And by the way, same exact talking points. Oh, we'll be greeted as liberators, etc. Carlson is a lying mother. Tucker writes in, threat of biological weapons, so the solution is to create a worldwide threat of nuclear holocaust. Yeah, no, Putin has threatened nuclear war several times. I don't see the Greenwalds of the world saying, "God, can you believe?" Imagine if Dick Cheney threatened nuclear war. The old Glenn Greenwald would have gone nuts. I would have gone nuts. That's unbelievable. That's outrageous. What a terrible, terrible thing to say. Putin does it. Sound of silence. Well, I do hear kissing sounds, little smooches on Putin's behind. I Am Sock writes in, Russia had no choice but to invade Ukraine to stop the Jewish, gay, Nazi biological weapons. Okay, that's funny, but think about it, guys. I almost mentioned in that story, so I'm glad you reminded me. So they say, we got to denazify Ukraine, that's why we're going in. Plus, they're too woke. Which one is it?
So ridiculous.
Okay, I'm pretty sure the Nazis weren't woke. I'm pretty sure about that. Okay, let's go to Nick Clark the Shark just joined on YouTube. You're awesome, Nick. Thank you. Hit the join button below. Anywhere else, tyt.com/join. Your membership's everything. By the way, if you're a member, you get all of our shows anytime you want. Poe the frickin' Rickin' Dragon on Twitch writes in, happy 18 months, take my Bezos bucks. If you want to learn how to do that, by the way, if you have Amazon Prime, membership is free to you on Twitch. You do that by going to tyt.com/prime. It takes about 30 seconds. You take Jeff Bezos' money and you give it to us. It costs you nothing. Chip gave 500 bits. Adam Baum gifted 5 subs. Fat guy named Tiny wrote in, 12 months. Wow, nobody I'd rather celebrate a year with than Anna. Thank you for everything you do, TYT. Always stay salty, Anna. All hail the Salt Queen.
Thank you.
Okay, all right, we'll be back. All right, back on TYT, Casper.
Well, we've got some updates on how the Russian troops are doing in Ukraine, so let's discuss. Turns out Putin really underestimated things. Russian troops in Ukraine have been attempting to encircle Kiev, the capital of Ukraine, but it is very clear that Vladimir Putin really underestimated Ukrainian forces and how aggressively they would fight back. Nothing made that clearer than a video. It's footage from a drone showing how Russian tanks were essentially ambushed by Ukrainian forces. Let's take a look at that video and we'll discuss.
These are scenes from the town of Brovary, which is about 10 miles or so to the east of the city. It's an armored Russian column that has been trying to work its way down the east side of the Ukrainian capital. But there are images taken from a drone from the air, and you can see the moment at which the column comes under ferocious attack from anti-tank missiles in a sort of ambush as Ukrainian forces really pounding those armored vehicles. And then, from the ground level as well, you can see people have gone up to the tank column after it's been destroyed. One of the narrators on one of those clips I think you're playing now saying, look, you come to Ukraine, you come to this land, and this is what you get. And so it underlines just how defiant and how effective the Ukrainians are being at the moment in pushing back those Russian armored columns as they attempt to encircle this city.
So while it's difficult to get a confirmation on how many Russian troops have died, US officials claim that as many as 6,000 Russian troops have died in this war so far. Again, it's hard to confirm that, but that's what they're saying. And honestly, it's even me, like I'm pretty shocked by all of this because we're dealing with Russia, which of course has much stronger military capabilities than Ukraine does, and Ukraine is really putting up a fight here. I know that you love that video, you're gonna talk about it, but I don't know. I don't like seeing people like get destroyed.
No, let me explain. Let me explain.
Yeah.
So first of all, Russian tanks, go F yourself. So you're goddamn right, I love that video. And so I'm gonna get to caveats in a second, very important ones, okay? But why? Because unfortunately, as we've done this show for literally 2 decades now, all I've ever seen, and unfortunately, it's been mainly the US, okay? But other countries as well, Russia, in Syria, Chechnya, and other places, giant countries with tons and tons of weapons go into a defenseless country and just obliterate it, right? And it's, or Saudis with Yemen. How are the farmers of Yemen gonna fight back? They don't have weapons, they don't have resources, etc. So this time Russia rolls in and goes, oh, we are mighty Russia. We have more money, we have more weapons than you, and we're gonna roll you over, and we're gonna destroy you, and there's nothing you could do about it. And the Ukrainians say, well, agree to disagree. There is something we can do about it. So Russian tank, go F yourself, okay? So I love the hubris of Putin. It's like, oh, I'll just roll my tanks in a 40-mile column, have them as sitting ducks. But the Ukrainians will surrender to me because I'm so mighty. Well, it didn't turn out that way, did it, Vlad? No, they're sitting ducks. Now Ukrainian drones, Ukrainian missiles are taking out the tanks one by one. And the reason they were stuck on the road to Kyiv for so long is because the idiot did a 40-mile line of tanks just sitting there. Right. So you take out the first one, you take out the second one, they're stuck. So they were stuck for days and days and days. And so I love that their invasion is going poorly. I do not agree with Russian propagandists like Jimmy Dore doing videos saying that the Ukrainians are committing war crimes against Russian soldiers. No, it's not a war crime when someone invades your country and is in a tank to blow up your house and your hospital and your school for you to fight back. The war crime is the invasion. The war crime is the warship and the tanks. Fighting back against that is not a war crime. It is the definition of self-defense. Okay, now having said that, I gotta say this, Anna, sorry. Okay. Nonetheless, because I'm a progressive, I think about those poor Russian soldiers in that tank who didn't vote on the war, who didn't do anything for it. They had the misfortune of having a monster be their leader in Russia. It's all Putin's fault. Yeah. And by the way, the oligarchs who support him, all those billionaires, including the guy who owns Chelsea, the soccer club in UK, and all of them, they all supported this. They all made money off of Putin. They're all monsters. They sent those poor Russian soldiers to go die in Ukraine. So I love the Ukrainians for fighting back, and they have no choice at all. It's literally either they're going to die and their families are going to die, or they have to fight back against the Russians. But you shouldn't celebrate the deaths of those soldiers. We don't celebrate the deaths of anyone. I'm celebrating the fact that the Ukrainians were able to miraculously fight back here and stop a war of aggression in its tracks for a little while. And obviously, the more frustrated Putin is getting because of his idiocy and his arrogance, the worse he gets and the more humanitarian crisis that he creates by then going and bombing from the air, exactly. Which also is a huge downside of this. But what are you gonna do? Blame the Ukrainians for fighting back and protecting their families? That's insane to do that.
Right, I agree with you on that front. Obviously, they have the right to defend themselves and fight back against the Russians. There have been a few things here and there that are problematic, right? And you want to ensure that, look, Ukraine was illegally invaded by Russia, okay? They have the moral standing for the most part, but there have been a few things that I think are worth mentioning because we should be fair. So for instance, these near daily press conferences that they do where they have these Russian prisoners of war, essentially part of the press conference, they're held hostage and they're being forced to say things. That does go against certain rules of law if those rules really exist. You get what I'm saying?
No, I do. And look, guys, we're always gonna be fair because the whole point of a news show, if you're doing it right, is to give you the truth, right? To give you reality and the facts. So I'm against wars of aggression. That's my perspective. I hope to God most of you are, right? But the facts are the same no matter what. And if the Ukrainians started doing terrible things, we would tell you, in fact, yes. So of course, we don't trot out the hostages and make them do hostage tapes, etc. But at the same time, what the Ukrainians are trying to do is say, no, we're gonna fight back, and you're not gonna take this country without a fight. And so the little old ladies coming and giving the sunflower seeds to the Russian soldiers and saying, put it in your pockets, because when you all die here, we'd like to have beautiful flowers grow in the dirt where you died. No, I feel bad for deaths on both sides, but I love that woman. And I love the guy who told the Russian warship to go after himself. They are defending their land, their families, their lives. So easy for us to nitpick, right?
Yes.
And go, oh, a little bit here and a little bit there, and I wish you were a little bit nicer, as you were trying to make sure your wife and children weren't murdered by these Russian soldiers. Yes, it's just the same with us, guys. When we invaded Iraq, those American soldiers, it wasn't their fault. It wasn't their fault in Vietnam, and except for a few guys like American Sniper, who was a maniac and killed civilians on purpose. But overall, America sent those soldiers, and the decision makers are guilty. Bush and Cheney are guilty, and in this case, the decision makers in Russia are guilty. And so, if you're angry, and you should direct that towards Putin and the people who are backing him financially.
All right, well, let's move on to our next story, this time involving US officials and some of the backlash that they're facing. So, Vice President Kamala Harris is getting quite a bit of backlash from individuals who, first of all, are on the right, but also watched her press conference with Poland's president. Now, there was a question about how Ukrainian refugees are going to be treated in places like Poland and the United States. There has been a lot more pressure placed on a few countries to take in refugees, whereas other countries have not committed to doing so. And so after the question was asked, just pay close attention to the kind of reaction you see from Kamala Harris.
My colleague here in Poland noticed he recently spoke with the mayor of the largest border town, who told him that the refugee system is essentially not set up for this, that it will collapse. It's an improvised system that can work for maybe 2 weeks, but not indefinitely. And I'm wondering what the United States is going to do more specifically to set up a permanent infrastructure. And relatedly, is the United States willing to make a specific allocation for Ukrainian refugees? And for President Duda, I wanted to know if you think, and if you asked the United States to specifically accept more refugees.
Okay. A friend in need is a friend indeed.
Okay, I can first. Okay, so this time.
So they're looking at each other, who's gonna take this difficult question first, that's my guess. And they landed on Kamala Harris, which is why she went ahead and she started answering the question. But this was a moment that was taken advantage of by Republicans, by the right wing, people who actually never care about refugees. In fact, have done pretty aggressive campaigns against accepting asylum seekers and refugees. But nonetheless, George Papadopoulos, a former Trump campaign aide, says she's awkwardly laughing. Again, discussing refugees is no laughing matter. Why she laughs at this is deranged. Oh, so you think laughing at refugees, rejecting them, abandoning them, allowing them to fend for themselves, possibly die, you think that's a laughing matter, right? Except that's what the Republican Party represents over and over and over again. Certainly when it comes to refugees from Syria, refugees from majority Muslim countries, we know what they're all about. One more, Cenk, Benny Johnson, who's with Turning Point USA, says, only Kamala Harris would find it appropriate to laugh when talking about the topic of Ukrainian refugees.
So look, I'm conflicted on this. On the one hand, there's no question that Anna's right about the Republicans' point of view on refugees. So, I mean, you want to talk about a joke, you're a joke. The minute we wanted to bring in Afghan refugees, our interpreters, etc., it was the right wing. It was like, they're brown, we don't want them in the country. From Iraq, we don't want them. They're all terrorists. You don't know if they've been vetted. That's the number one right wing talking point. You don't know if they've been vetted enough, right? Mm-hmm. And so
Tulsi Gabbard's one of them, by the way.
Of course, Tulsi Gabbard hates Muslims. She's a bigot. By the way, Ukrainian refugees jury's out. White Christians, all of a sudden, a little bit more open to them, right? All of a sudden, the right wing's like, oh, our heart goes out to them. On the other hand, Russians committing war crimes are kind of like that too. It's because they're not woke. They're not woke. So they're kind of split on that. So now, on the other hand, Kamala Harris has got to reel it back in, man. She has the most awkward laugh in American history.
It's not just about her laugh. You have to take a step back and not judge based on one moment, right? So if it was just one moment that looked bad and had bad optics, I would dismiss it. However, I don't know what happened to her. I mean, when she's in the context of cross-examining someone during a Senate hearing, she rocks it. But ever since she's been vice president, she's really struggled in terms of public speaking, getting her messaging right, awkward laughter when she's asked difficult questions. It's just not good. It's not a good look. She's really flailing, and I don't understand what's going on.
I think she's nervous. I think she's incredibly nervous. It's you're on the international spotlight here. By the way, credit to the reporter for an excellent question. Okay, so your hearts go out to Ukraine, yes, but do your visas go out to Ukraine? So are you going to take in Ukrainian refugees in America? Are you going to help Poland, who is swamped? That Eastern Europe is now swamped with 2 million Ukrainian refugees, right? And so that's an excellent question. And no, she's not laughing at the question. She is laughing at the awkward moment between her and the Polish leader as to who was going to take that hard question first. But by the way, lost in all this brouhaha over the laughter is, yes, but our policy is not that good right now.
No, it's not. So can we talk about that actually? Yes. Because I think that is, first of all, reporter did ask a great question. And I would like to talk about the asymmetrical nature in which refugees or countries are taking in refugees, okay? So let's go to graphic 4 here because the UN has done some good things. The UN's refugee agency welcomed a decision last week by the European Union to offer temporary protection to Ukrainians and third-party nationals who have refugee or permanent resident status in Ukraine, offering them immediate protection. So if you are a Ukrainian and you make your way to a European Union country, you are protected, at least temporarily. So far, the majority of those fleeing have crossed into countries neighboring Ukraine like Poland, Hungary, you have Moldova, Slovakia, Romania, while thousands of others have made their way to countries farther, including Germany, France, and Ireland. Okay, but when you look at the United States, we have not committed to taking in Ukrainian refugees, at least not yet. Other nations are being accused of falling behind, particularly Britain, after it acknowledged issuing just 300 visas to Ukrainians so far in response to the crisis. The UK issued the visas under a program for refugees with family links to the country. The Home Office had received a total of 8,900 applications under the program, with appointments made at visa application centers for nearly half of those cases, and 340 of them undergoing security checks. So understandably, Britain's getting a lot of heat for this, and the United States has already taken some important steps to help Ukrainians, including offering temporary protected status, so the same thing that EU countries are doing. But again, where they're falling short right now is committing to taking in like X number of refugees. There hasn't really been a statement on that yet. And I want to remind you all, 2 million refugees or 2 million Ukrainian civilians have fled Ukraine.
Yeah, so I just want to say, I don't think NBC News is right that it's that important a step that we took. Those are for people who already had visas here and happened to be here on business or tourism or students. That's not that many people. And so, yes, they can't go back to Ukraine, a lot of them, and it makes sense for us to do that. But that doesn't really address the refugee situation at all. Let's just be clear about that.
Right. So that's where we are. I think it is important to focus on what the reality is. And yeah, Kamala Harris has not been doing a great job but look, part of the problem is, Cenk, does she have foreign policy expertise, right?
So people say that all the time. I hear you, but to me, it's not that hard. You just you learn, right? So how did we learn the things that we know? We study the news, we study the facts. So I didn't need to go to Poland to understand Ukrainian refugees streaming into Poland. I understand the issue of refugees because we've covered it for 20 years, we've studied it, we know it. She could do likewise. And she's gotta, like, look, simple advice here for whatever it's worth, and we're not big fans of Kamala Harris within the Democratic Party, so I'm sure she's not looking forward to advice from us. But it's okay to say, hey, that's a good question. We'll follow up afterwards and get you a clear answer, right? So you don't have to know every answer. You don't have to be perfect on it. You just have to say, hey, this is what I have now in terms of information. I'll get you more information later. But she's at this point, she's frazzled because everybody's attacking her, and I get it. That's a tough spotlight, right? And there's all those stupid articles that came out in Washington a couple of months ago saying, oh, she's no good and her office is in disarray, and now all of a sudden she's lost a lot of political capital, and so she's getting more and more nervous. Just one of her advisors, just stop telling her to laugh or giggle in serious situations. And I'm telling you this, I know we're not on the same side within the Democratic Party, but I'm genuinely saying it because it looks terrible.
It comes across as callous, right? Especially in a serious context like that. So I think you're right. And listen, she's the Vice President of the United States. It's an incredibly powerful position. I get it, especially when you're being bombarded with negative news or negative attacks. You got to brush it off, and you got to at least put on a brave face and get the job done. We got to take a break. When we come back, we're gonna move off foreign policy related news and talk a little bit about what's really transpiring with inflation in America.
We're doing shirts to support the Ukrainian human rights movement, and yes, they're aggressive. Some are, benign, like the Sunflower Bay, and other ones tell Russian warships what to do with themselves. 100% of the profits go to Razom for Ukraine.org, razomforukraine.org. So we're trying to help in any way we can. All right. Let's go to members. OJM says Ukrainians taking out the Russian tanks like that is some David and Goliath stuff. Though frankly, I'm sure the insurgents in Iraq felt that way about us too. So that's a fair point. Yeah, it definitely looks David versus Goliath, and it's hard not to cheer that on for sure. And there's no reason not to cheer it on. They're defending themselves and their families. But did some Iraqis feel that way about us? Of course they did. Of course they did. And were we Goliath? Of course we were. Textan says, that was very well done. They knocked out the lead and rear tanks almost simultaneously, shooting fish in a barrel at that point. Ukrainians are not to be effed with. Well, that is something that we've learned here. But remember, they had the entire West rallying to their side, and they've already had the West sell them a lot of weapons, etc. People in Yemen, not so lucky, right? In Syria, oh my God, those poor folks, just devastated from every side, right? So it's a different situation. The Dragon who says, Nee said, I'd hate to see what happens to those troops who deny orders. There's some that have been captured saying they'll be executed if they come home. I don't blame the Russian troops either. Yeah, look, I don't know what's true or not true about that. Historically, Russian soldiers have been killed if they don't follow orders. But that's a long history. I have no idea if that applies here, okay? So we'll see how things develop. Let's stick with the facts. Sina Hogaboom says, Kamala's weak, Turner Ojeda 2024. Would be a hell of a ticket. I don't know that America's ready for that ticket. I I might be. Efrain Gomez writes in, he's they're a YouTube member. I especially enjoyed Cenk and Ben's episode yesterday, I think they mean Monday, on Old School. It showed a softer side of Cenk that I haven't seen before.
Oh.
It was nice. Oh, fortunately I have a lot of soft sides. And then they continue, Anna, you're a badass and one of the best journalists around.
Thank you, it's very sweet.
That is, it's awesome.
I love
Thank
you guys.
No, they're super sweet. And you're super salty.
How good does my hair look today, by the way?
Is that what we're talking about?
Look, I don't really put a lot of effort into my hair. Today I did, and it paid off. I just want to say.
Okay, well, there it is. We're breaking news. It is on point. We're moving forward. I'm going to read one more comment at least. Michael Adante said, why couldn't Ukraine implement a no-fly zone over its own airspace? Michael, they don't have enough planes.
They don't have the capability for it.
Yeah, so that you need a ton of planes to do a no-fly zone. You need to take out the other side's missiles, etc. So that's why they just don't have enough planes. We'll be back. Back on TYT, Cenk and Anna with you guys. Forward.
All right, so let's talk a little bit about inflation because it's certainly something that corporations are taking advantage of to increase their profits. So, inflation continues to harm American households across the country. In fact, the Bureau of Labor Statistics has released new data showing just how deep the problem is. Now, the reasons for inflation should also be addressed, and corporate greed has a lot to do with it. And we'll get to that in a bit, so hold tight. First, let me give you the data from the Bureau of Labor Statistics. They find this, that the inflation hit another 40-year high as the consumer price index jumped 7.9% in the past year. Increases for food, gasoline, and shelter contributed the most to inflation, with gas prices increasing 6.6% and accounted for nearly a third of all items' monthly increase. Now, the index for food has also increased by 1% according to this data, while the food at home index increased 1.4%, with both being the biggest increase since April of 2020. And keep in mind, this news comes as we have learned more about increases in wages. Like, that's something that some of these corporations try to celebrate, but wages have not kept up with inflation. The news comes despite the fact that the United States added 678,000 jobs in February and wages jumped 5.1%. Now, the fact of the matter is, these corporations seem to have taken full advantage of the inflation hysteria, the inflation narrative in the press to just jack up their prices to bolster their profits, even if they don't need to do it, even if there's no problem with supply chain shortages or supply chain issues. So the top 30 companies, for instance, in the major industry categories of the Consumer Price Index have raised prices while collectively boosting their profits by $151 billion, and that's according to a watchdog group known as Accountable US. The three biggest firms in the food at home category, Walmart, Kroger, and unfortunately Costco as well, saw their net incomes rise a combined $238 million. Grocery prices were up 8.6% in February compared with the previous year, the Bureau of Labor Statistics announced on Tuesday. And what do they do with these profits, folks? Do they use these profits to help out their employees with the inflation that they're causing by just arbitrarily increasing prices? No, of course not. They don't do that at all. What they do is pay themselves again further by buying shares of their own stocks. So the companies also bought back an additional $28 billion of their own shares, a strategy to boost the stock price, which also happens to boost executive compensation because they own shares of the company themselves. I should also note that the board for Amazon has just approved another $10 billion in corporate stock buybacks. So that's what they do with the profits after they increase prices following all of these headlines about inflation.
Okay, guys, so let me explain who's responsible for inflation. When you look at the margins, you see the clear answer, and you'll be able to see it for yourself. So you see inflation going up, depending on the quarter, 6 to 8%, right? So one of the the most recent quarter that we have information for is the fourth quarter of last year. And so for the S&P 500, those are the top 500 companies, what was their profit margin? Now this is important because, hey, listen, if it turns out that inflation's at 8%, but their profit margins are down at Walmart and those giant companies, and so they're passing on some of the price increases to you guys, but they're also taking a hit and their profit margins have gone down, right? Then you would say, hey, inflation is a real problem for everybody and businesses are just responding to supply and demand, right? No, their profit margins are up. And last quarter, they were up to 22%. 22% for the top companies in the world and in America, that's a giant profit margin. And the profit margins didn't go down, they went up. In fact, I'm gonna read you a quick summary from near the end of last year from Reuters, one of the most established news organizations. They say, US companies have retained strong profit margins through the pandemic because they have cut costs and passed along high prices to customers. So corporations maximize profit. That's what they do, period. Anyone who tells you otherwise is a child. And so they saw this opportunity. They're like, look, no one's holding us accountable because of the macroeconomic forces, because of quantitative easing, having put tons of money into the economy and into those particular companies. Well, what we can do is we can actually cut our costs and raise prices.
Yep.
And our margins will be literally record-breaking. That's what Reuters was reporting. Record-breaking profit margins.
Yep.
So it is an indisputable fact that the prices are higher because companies are making decisions to take advantage of this situation, not share the pain, but double the pain on you guys.
Yes.
They then ironically send their lobbyists to go tell the politicians that they own all of the Republican Party and unfortunately a decent chunk of the Democratic Party to go out there and tell you guys, oh, your wages went up too much. That's why there's inflation. And you know what? We can't do child tax credit. We can't do all these things that would help your family because of inflation. I mean, look at that monstrous lie, right? They take advantage of the inflation to increase your prices, and then they use their greed to ironically argue you shouldn't get anything more.
So don't worry, the Biden administration is aware of what's going on, and Biden has taken action already. He has wagged his finger and he told them to cut it out.
Oh wow, that should be really effective.
But honestly, look, what would Biden do? I'd love to know. Like, what could Biden unilaterally do?
Well, look, here's a couple of things here. First of all, tell the truth, it makes a giant difference.
It does, true.
Okay, now when I tell you that the profit margins are up 22%, and I explain these simple business and economic facts, you guys get it, right? It's not that complicated. And so now, and a lot of people see it because we're a relatively large show, right? But imagine if the president said it or Jen Psaki said it and they showed you these giant graphics showing how, and they named names of different companies and they shamed them. Now you say, look, that's not the best option, right? But it's a lot better than nothing, right? And so what that would do is that would create pressure on Walmart and all these other companies that are jacking up the prices, and it would call them out and it would get everybody angry. Oh, it turns out the prices are up, not because of macroeconomic forces, but because those companies decided to take advantage of those forces to rob us blind at a time that we need it most. And then he would argue, as we do here, no, it's not the time to cut from the American people. And at Walmart and all your goddamn lobbyists, and I'm just picking on Walmart, but there's 500 companies, they're all doing the same thing, okay? Because their job is to maximize profit, get it through your thick skulls. Like the reporters are they're just so depressingly unintelligent and uninformed. They can't tell any of this stuff. They repeat those corporate talking points and the lobbyist talking points like puppets. They're just so sad. That's why I gave you the Reuters report, because every once in a while, they accidentally, the truth breaks out, because they're like, well, it is true that their profit margins are at record numbers, right? Now, but they don't connect it back to, hey, wait a minute, when we talk about inflation, it was clearly, obviously, the corporations that did it, right? So if the president does it, it makes a big difference. And then he could say, you know what, I'm passing these bills. You wanna stop money going to people's kids? Because you know what, if they're having trouble keeping up with the prices, then we could help them through the government by giving them a child tax credit, right? And instead they're saying, they're arguing the opposite. And they're letting Manchin run the entire country. And the Manchin is a corporate prostitute.
Totally.
He just does whatever his donors tell him. And Biden doesn't have the courage or the morals to call out Manchin for who he is.
100%. And so what we're really seeing here is a wide scale, what we experienced in the very beginning of the pandemic with people buying up all of the toilet paper and then selling it on eBay for insane prices, right? Price gouging people. Imagine and remember how infuriating that was. Now you have corporations doing it on like a broad level. It's just, it's gross. All right, well, I wanted to get to one more story before we move over to our second hour. And this is about what states like Idaho and Texas are doing toward trans students. It's absolutely disgusting. So red states have unfortunately launched a full-scale assault on transgender youth in the country, and not just transgender youth. They're going after transgender students whose parents are actually loving parents who are seeking the help that they need. Things like mental health care, which is incredibly important for transgender students. Now, in Idaho on Tuesday, the state house passed a bill that would make providing gender-affirming care to transgender youths a felony, punishable by life in prison. It also includes a provision making it a crime for parents or guardians to permit their child to travel out of state for treatment. And this is an ongoing trend that we're seeing among right-wing lawmakers and state legislatures. I recently shared a story about a state lawmaker in Missouri who is attempting to pass legislation that would punish anyone who helps a woman from Missouri seek an abortion out of state. They're trying to legislate past their own jurisdictions. That's how disgusting this is. And the bill, by the way, in Idaho, HB 675, easily passed in a 55-13 vote, with just one Republican joining all the Democrats in rejecting the measure. The measure will now move to the state Senate and may be signed into law by Governor Brad Little, who is a Republican. So it's very likely that this could pass and become law in Idaho. Now, what is this about? Note that they're focusing on care for transgender youths, right? That means if you are a parent who is concerned and wants to ensure that your child is getting mental health care, that would qualify as something that would break this proposed law.
Okay, guys, so first I want to clear the record on something that they always lie about and try to mislead you on that's critical to this law. And then I want to tell you why fascism is here. If you live in a red state, you're very close to living under fascist rule. I don't think that's an exaggeration. I'm going to tell you why, and we're going to show you another example from Texas that is, I can't believe it's happening in America. Okay, so number one, they make it sound like it's young kids who are getting gender changing surgery. It's not true. That's not allowed, okay? And they're not taking hormones either. It's only things that are reversible, but the majority of it is just simply mental health treatment. And suicides are an enormous issue, especially in the transgender community. And these monsters, these Republicans are like, no, I don't want you seeing a therapist. I don't want you, feeling any better about yourself.
It's disgusting.
We want to demonize you, and to 14-year-old kids, 13, 15-year-old kids, we want you to know that you're evil and that you're a problem and that you should feel terrible about that. Don't you dare seek mental health treatment. Okay, they're disgusting people. So, okay, now, look, two parts of this bill that are unreal. Number one is they're the Gestapo now. as we're going to show you in Texas, other states are passing similar bills. They're going into people's houses, and it's the jackbooted thugs of the government.
Yep.
I mean, it's what the right wing claimed they were against, right? And going to people's houses and say, well, okay, let's see if you're breaking any rules. Are you forget even breaking rules? They're like, how are you treating the kids? Are you actually taking care of them? You're taking care of the kids? We might lock you up for life in prison for taking care of your kids.
How does this not break HIPAA regulations? How does it, the person who should, or the people making the decisions about the health and safety of children should be the parents, right? I was under the impression, I wasn't really, but I thought that parents mattered. The parents' choice mattered.
All of a sudden,
what happened?
A war on parents, and it's led by Republicans. Everything they say is a lie. In Virginia, they say, oh, it was a war on parents because some parents don't want their kids to wear a mask. Now, they literally bust into your house.
Yep.
And they ask you, are you treating your kids well? If you are, you might go to life in prison. It's insane. They don't want you to treat your kids well. They want you to treat them, so don't get them health, et cetera. Guys, it is not like Gestapo. That is Gestapo.
It is.
That is fascism. And the last thing, we'll talk about it more in a second. I know Anna talked about it yesterday. They're not letting people leave the state. You're now, if you make the mistake of living in a red state, you could be taken prisoner by that state. Wait, hey, I want to do my own care in a different state, whether it's for my kids, it's for a woman, et cetera. No, you're banned from leaving. You're now in prison by the state of Missouri when it comes to women, the state of Idaho when it comes to families.
And
we're taking away all of your freedom. This is the party that claims they're for freedom. What a bunch of grotesque liars.
And if anyone assists you in seeking reproductive health care in another state, the proposal coming from Missouri is that anyone who helps you, even if it's someone who answers a hotline to give you information, they face penalties, they face prosecution, they face consequences. That's what the proposal is. Now let's go to Texas, because once you understand the details of what's happening to parents who have transgender children, you'll get a sense of why Cenk is so furious, why we're so furious. So first, a little bit of context. Texas Governor Greg Abbott's directive calling on the State Department of Family and Protective Services to investigate the families of transgender youths who obtain treatment has pushed Texas Children's Hospital, the largest pediatric hospital in the United States, to halt gender-affirming care for minors. Texas parents of transgender children are now looking to get treatment out of state or move altogether, okay? So again, I wanna really emphasize the kind of care that we're talking about here, because these disgusting right-wingers would have you believe that there's like 12-year-olds getting sex reassignment surgery. That is not what's happening here. We're talking about mental health care, and we're talking about creating a situation where transgender youth feel comfortable in their bodies until they're old enough to make those difficult decisions for themselves. So for instance, let's go to graphic 8 and 9 here. The American Psychological Association and the American Academy of Pediatrics advocates that young people who have gender dysphoria should be connected to gender-affirming care to ease depression, anxiety, and thoughts of suicide. Now, for most trans children, gender-affirming care means what? It means mental health services or reversible blockers that pause puberty in kids with gender dysphoria until they are old enough to decide if they want to medically transition. That is what they are going after in Idaho, in Texas, and they're not only going after these kids, they're going after their parents, and I'll give you a specific example from Texas. So it's the Briggle family, okay? Amber and Adam Briggle have come forward because as a result of what's happening in Texas, they're being investigated. They have a transgender child, and here's what they are going through. Amber Briggle said she learned of the investigation on February 28th when she found a sticky note on her desk at the massage studio she owns, saying she had missed an urgent private call. When she called the number, the woman on the line informed her that she was a Child Protective Services investigator and she was 30 minutes away from the Briggle home.
They're doing a home invasion.
It gets worse. It gets worse. When the inspector showed up at their home Wednesday, March 2nd, they showed the investigator their backyard, gardens, and a trampoline. They stopped her at the kids' bedrooms. Letting this person, a stranger who was investigating them, into the children's space felt like a violation, they told her. The Briggles had a legal right to stop the investigator and refused to answer questions, their lawyer told them. And the worst part about all of this is, as this investigation is taking place, the Briggle family has no choice but to explain what's happening to the children. Imagine what that makes the kids feel like. And so Amber Briggle says, we told the children that they have the right to not answer questions. We told them that the government is trying to spy on us, even though we have done nothing wrong.
Okay, Child Protective Services is supposed to come in situations where the children are in danger, they're being beat, their lives are in danger, etc. And they do important work. Instead, they're now using them to bully and intimidate American families. And remember, this is for helping their kids. So in terms of mental health treatment, look, the right wing, unfortunately, are great at propaganda. So they'll go around telling all these lies about surgeries, etc. And what are they telling them in mental health? How does that help them or hurt them? They're making the case that mental health treatment, therapists, hurt the kids so much that the kids should be taken away from their parents, put into foster care, and that the parents should be imprisoned. So let me tell you what it actually does. Human Rights Campaign explained. Treatment, quote, reduces the risk of moderate or severe depression by 60% and suicidal thoughts by 73% in transgender young people. So the Republicans are saying, well, that might save the transgender kid's life. We don't want that.
Right, the pro-life Republicans who are legislating and regulating women's bodies because they purport to care about human lives, apparently don't care about human lives at all, right? I mean, this is a perfect example, and we have many other examples that we've shared with you in the past. But these people, on one hand, will claim that they value liberty, they value freedom.
Liars.
They're complete and utter liars. They love nothing more than to get into your bedroom and tell you what you can and can't do within your own family, within your own home, with your own children. Okay, and let me help you guys visualize what Republican liberty and freedom looks like in America. Let's watch. The only time they're ever concerned about freedom is deregulating corporations so they can rob you. That's the only time they care about small government.
Okay, I'm gonna read you one last quote from the father in the Briggle family. Because remember, they're threatening to imprison them and prevent them from leaving the state. He said, if we have to become political refugees in our own country, then that's what we do. But I don't know where it's safe. These people aren't like fascists, they are fascists. So at this point, I don't want to hear any talk from Republicans about, no guys, we just have simple disagreements. Well, we think we should bust into people's houses, take their kids away from them because they love their kids and they were treating their kids well. We should make the decisions for them about how to treat their kids. And then if they disagree with us, we should make sure they can't leave the state and then stuff them into prison. And in Idaho, life in prison. Life in prison for loving your children. No, Republicans are ugly, they're immoral, and they're fascist. I don't want anything to do with them. That's the reality of what Republicans are today in America. So no, I don't want any BS happy talk from stupid reporters and Democrats in Washington telling us, oh, let's just all get along. I can't tell who's right or wrong. Well, the right wing or the left wing, I can't tell. I can tell. The Republicans hate our freedom. They hate our families, and they hate our right to choose whatever we want and our equality, and they hate justice. And I don't want to deal with fascists, and that's exactly what these people are.
All right, we got to take a break. That does it for our first hour. But when we come back for the second hour, looks like Donald Trump has taken a page out of the televangelist book, and now he's trying to scam his supporters for a private jet. We've got those details and more when we come back.
Our audience has given us everything, so we couldn't be more connected. When we first started, people would start giving us directions and say, okay, the mics are too large, move them. Turn them into lav mics. I mean, they were incredible. And then one guy walked in and gave us a really expensive switcher and said, you guys need this, and walked out. Okay, it's amazing. They helped us build a studio. They did a $2 million funding campaign for us. And so they really are us. We do this show together to the point where some of our hosts are even former listeners. So when we say that the audience is part of TYT, we really mean it.
I think what the audience also appreciates is especially if they're members, they really get an inside look into who we are, our personal lives, what drives and motivates us. It goes beyond just storytelling. I think that what we do is allow our viewers and our listeners into our daily lives, and we give them kind of like this inside look into everything that we're passionate about and why it is that we're doing what we're doing, right? Like the motivation behind what we're doing, I think is important for our audience to know, and we're not shy about sharing that with them. And it's different from what people typically see in legacy media outlets where everything is kind of dry and robotic and there's really no personality or authenticity that comes along with it. Oftentimes when we're doing the show, I don't really think of it as me telling them stories. I think of it as us having a mutual respect and conversation with one another. And as I said earlier, I mean, not only do I feel that through the work I do, I'm informing our audience, but they inform me oftentimes as well. You know, they'll pitch stories to us. They'll tell us, you know, a certain perspective or angle to a story that we might have missed. And I love it.
Our TYT audience has been building this show and this network with us for 20 years. Now we're expanding and connecting our audience around the world in even more exciting and powerful ways. Look, I don't want you to miss another petition, poll, community conversation, or TYT segment. Connect with informed, passionate, and compassionate progressives, and even new progressives. They're joining our movement every day. This is gonna be amazing when we work together. So our community members are learning together, they're building lifelong relationships, and even politically organizing together. Here's what Power Slave Wolf has to say as they begin interacting with our community after making TYT their #1 trusted news source. Quote, I've been a TYT viewer since the Obama years and have since found them to be a far more trustworthy news source than most TV news outlets. Away from viewing TYT, I'm a musician, electric bass guitar, sim racer, satire enthusiast, and rollerblader, the latter being my main means of intense exercise. TYT, my local news, none of the stations in my area are Sinclair owned as far as I know, and comedy style news shows are my trusted news sources. The former and the latter both having something in common in that both have something that TV news sorely lacks, a very low tolerance for BS. So sign up for free at tyt.com/community. We're making it easier to connect, stay informed, and even take action.
Hi, I'm Bartholomew Joseph Kyle. I do audio for the main show, The Young Turks. I also do audio for Post Game. I started in 2006. I met Cenk Uygur at the Iraq for Sale screening that was directed by Robert Greenwald. And watching that, I want to figure out a way to be part of something that's genuine and authentic.
All right, back on TYT, Cenk and Anna with you guys, and also Michael. Michael Heibel, just joined by hitting the join button below. Thank you, Michael. I want to read one comment because it's so relevant here. Progressive Positive wrote in on our Twitch channel saying, I'm a therapist and can attest to the fact that gender-affirming therapy saves lives. Placing children in foster care puts them at higher risk for abuse and neglect of all kinds. Those laws are crimes against humanity. Heartbreaking.
Yeah, I agree with that.
That's right. They're crime against humanity, which is what Republicans do consistently. Republicans are immoral monsters. Don't tell me happy talk about, oh, no, as they take people's kids away, we should call it even. I'm not calling it even. I fight back. I fight back not just for our side, but I fight back for equality and justice. And anyone who doesn't is not a moral person. All right, Anna.
Well, Donald Trump would have you believe he's a billionaire, but apparently he needs to continue scamming his own supporters to get a new private jet. Now, this is a fundraising effort that he pushed in an email that was sent very recently, and it came an hour after a plane carrying him was forced to make an emergency landing. So first, some details on what happened. A plane Trump was traveling in was forced to make an emergency landing in New Orleans shortly after takeoff on Saturday after one of the engines failed. The plane didn't even belong to him, it belonged to a GOP donor. Trump hitched a ride back to his Mar-a-Lago estate in Florida on a GOP donor's jet. Now, shortly after, Trump pretended to reveal a brand new plane to his supporters. Let's watch.
The time has come for ministries, particularly traveling ministries, to have some other method of travel other than the airlines. That's right. Yes, sir. Agreed. You get into this situation, we're not going to let you fly unless you're vaccinated. Well, to me, that's the mark of the beast.
Oh, sorry, that wasn't Trump. That was con men, Kenneth Copeland and his con men buddies, who are evangelical pastors, who are constantly asking their flock for money for private jets. And they say, sometimes they'll even say, no, 9 private jets are not enough. I need a 10th. That's what God wants. And now here's Trump saying, my donors flying me all across the country for free isn't enough.
Yeah.
One of them had a problem with its jets, and now that would have been an ironic way for Trump to go.
No,
right?
I could just see it now, right? Trump sitting in front of the television, Fox News is on, he's got his McDonald's, and he notices Copeland's little scam, and he's like, Copeland has the best scams.
Yeah.
I need to take advantage of that scam. How did I not think of that scam? That sounds like a good deal. Let me take advantage right now. And that's exactly what he did.
But you're not even kidding. Like, I guarantee you that if he saw that clip, he'd be like, wait, why is he getting jets? My followers are even stronger than his. Okay, and guys, the right wing they're all frauds. They're all con men. The only silver lining in this story is that they're wasting all the right wing money. All the grassroots money, you are all suckers and idiots and losers. Just like Trump said. Trump calls everybody suckers and losers, especially the people that trust them. And he's like, if he claims, guys, hey, if you're a right winger, you're a right winger. I don't believe this, but you believe this, right? You believe everything Trump says like a moron. So Trump said he has $10 billion. What does he need your $5 for? What does he need your $10 for?
Right.
Why does he need you to buy him a jet if he has $10 billion? You know he's a liar. You know he doesn't have $10 billion, and you know he loves ripping you off. Okay, schmuck, give him your money. What do I care? I don't care if your money's wasted on. Instead of it going to Republican candidates, it's going to go to Trump's jet. Good, idiot.
Yeah,
I love it.
I don't. Again, I also do not care about people who get suckered into giving Trump money for things that really you shouldn't be giving him money for. But if you want to do it, do it. The way that Trump does things, though, it just never changes, right? He's gotten into a little bit of trouble in the past for really just scamming his own supporters by doing these. It's basically a system that he puts in place that does repeated withdrawals from the individual's bank account. So you might think you're donating once, but it ends up being a recurring charge. And every month you end up donating the same amount without even realizing it. That has happened, and it appears that he's doing similar scams here. So the Trump Save America PAC sent an email out on Wednesday titled "Update Trump Force One," touting a reveal of a new Trump plane. Ooh, the Trump plane. And so what happens? Yeah, that's what you see.
That's the new Trump plane,
That's the new Trump plane. And so then, of course, the individual is solicited for donations. It also says, the body of the email read this: "I have a very important update on my plane, but I need to trust that you won't share it with anyone. My team is building a brand new Trump Force One. The construction of this plane has been under wraps. Not even the fake news media knows about it, and I can't wait to unveil it for everyone to see." Like, look, I get what you're saying about like, oh, look at these people getting scammed. I mean, if they're gonna give their money to Trump for like the billionth time after he's already scammed them, fine, whatever, good for them. But I do, like, as I read that, the body of the message, I can't help but think of like elderly people who fall for these kinds of scams all the time. All the time.
Damn it, Anna, don't be a Debbie Downer. I was having fun making fun of Republicans giving their hard-earned money to an obvious con man and not being able to tell, right? I mean, look, guys, okay, I'm gonna go back to fun. Okay, I'll come back to the grannies in a second. Look, although this is similar, I feel bad for the people that he scammed into giving money to his charity before he ran for president, to the Trump University, which then was hilariously not a university and didn't teach anything. And with the charity, he would buy giant portraits of himself. And guys, this is not in dispute. He had to pay millions of dollars and admit that he did it. He stole your money if you went to his so-called university or gave to his so-called charity. You could look it up, you could see the reports, you could see Trump's admission and him paying the fine. The guy is a legendary, to be fair to him, legendary con man.
He is.
Probably definitely the biggest con man in American history. He makes P.T. Barnum look like an amateur, right? All those snake oil salesmen of the past, hey, I'm not on Trump. But if you are a little old granny and you think, oh no, poor Trump, he needs a new jet.
Oh, come
on, somebody help your family members, man.
You gotta police their online activity if you're a family member with elderly people who might fall victim to these kinds of scams, because it happens all the time in different contexts. In this context, obviously we're talking about Trump. But by the way, Trump does have a private plane. He just doesn't use it.
Yeah.
So let's go to graphic 6. He bought a Boeing 757 airliner in 2011 and customized it to his preferences, adding the Trump family crest to all the plane's headrests and pillows.
Family crest, get the out of here.
Trump also fitted the plane out with a master bedroom that came complete with a big screen entertainment system and a master bath with gold fixtures. The plane is currently sitting unused in upstate New York. So why does he need to scam people? I mean, I don't even know if he's gonna use that money for an actual plane. Like, he might use that money for other purposes. He's a scammer.
Yeah, that's, by the way, Anna, I mean, look at us, right? Guys, we're making fun of the right wing, but I didn't realize that he might not use it on a plane at all. He might use it on burgers. Okay, like, everything he says is a lie. So that plane that he's got in upstate New York, it's in disrepair. Remember, he briefly had an airline? As with all of his businesses, instantly bankrupt, okay? He overspent like a moron, he ran out of money, just like with casinos. Who loses money running casinos? He's the dumbest man alive. The only thing he can do is these scams, because he can't run a real business. So the reason he's not using his own plane is because he probably didn't pay for upkeep, because he's cheap and he's an idiot. So he's probably literally afraid of going on his own plane because of safety reasons. It's his plane. There's no way that it works right.
I mean, I wouldn't be surprised. I mean, would you trust a plane that's owned by Donald Trump? Like, I wouldn't go on that plane.
Look, ironically, we're the only ones looking out for the right-wing voters here. Look, if you want to give him money, you can, but he's definitely gonna rob you. And do not go on Trump's plane. That is a disastrous idea. He couldn't manage anything right if his life depended on it, including his own planes.
Well, when we come back from the break, we'll talk about how Tucker Carlson's own words were used against Fox News in a court of law. We've got that story and more when we come back.
Rums. All right, on Twitch, Mina Michelle writes in, referring to Anna's hair, silky goddess.
Well, thank you.
Yeah, beautiful hair.
Thank you.
You were like asking for those compliments.
I was fishing.
Okay, well, you got another one here because Nick wrote it in the member section. Anna, your hair always looks great.
Yeah, beautiful hair.
I believe the kids call it drip.
Yes, they do. Poggers.
Poggers. All right. All right. RFK writes in. This is when the QAnon people are like, he's back. RFK writes in, on your next topic on inflation, 3 words: windfall profits tax. Great point. Any chance that the corporate Joe Biden, who's in love with his donors, is going to argue for a windfall profits tax? It would help him so much politically, right? He would say, he would get to point out, hey, look, why inflation's up 8%, their profit margin's up to 22%. They're obviously taking advantage of this situation. I'm going to fight on your behalf to make sure prices are lower. Oh no, but his donors would be upset with him. So Biden's going to go instead sit in a cave. I've never seen such a dichotomy, by the way. His foreign policy is borderline excellent. His domestic policy is a dumpster fire. So it's amazing. Funkin' for fun. By the way, is it? I think that we're about the only show that says that, right? Isn't it weird that all other shows are like they're either pro-Biden or anti-Biden? You can't find any nuance in any of his positions. Are you sure you're doing news? Right? All right. Funkin' for Fun says, Joe's an old man. What if he gets sick? Kamala may have to take the helm at one of the most pivotal points in history. Oh boy. I mean, but look, anyways. I hope it's the advisors, and I hope that either way it's the same advisors, because they're doing a good job on foreign policy. All right, Cousin Vinny says, housing, energy, and food all need to be strictly price controlled. If you want to be a capitalist, that's fine. You just shouldn't be allowed to do it in those industries. I hear you, but I think price controls are not a good idea. That's a very long conversation, but there's a lot of other things you can do, including the windfall profits tax. Nostra Science says, we'll have to start a trans and abortion underground railroad to get away from Missouri and Texas. That's where we are now. That's where we are. We're gonna have to figure out what to do with political refugees from red states. And how do we get them out? How do we get them out? And what if they start putting parents into prisons? How do we get them out of prison? This is insanity. Okay, Yvette Helmer and Duncan Hunter are American heroes. They just joined to be part of a news team that actually gives you the news. And by the way, when you join, you can get all of our shows anytime you want. So Yvette and Duncan, thank you. They hit the join button below. You can do that as well on YouTube. And everyone else, tyt.com/join to become a member. We appreciate it. I am out of time. We'll be back in a minute. All right, back on TYT, Cenk and Anna with you guys. News.
All right. Well, looks like Fox News is still in hot water. Tucker Carlson's own words were used against Fox News in a lawsuit involving the lies that have been pushed about the 2020 presidential election on the network. Now, the New York Supreme Court judge has now weighed in on whether the defamation accusations against Fox News should be dropped. And guess what? He's not dropping the lawsuit. It can proceed. Now, this is the voting machine company Smartmatic and its $2.7 billion defamation lawsuit against Fox News and Rudy Giuliani. It will move forward. The case involved many false and baseless claims made on Fox about voter fraud involving Smartmatic's voting machines. The judge notably dropped Jeanine Pirro and former Trump lawyer Sidney Powell from the lawsuit. With Sidney Powell, it's because of jurisdictional issues, so she will still have to face legal consequences for her role in lying about the election. But here's what we know. The ruling repeatedly says Fox hosts Giuliani and Powell made claims without any evidence and without any basis. It also says the claims made by Giuliani, Fox host Maria Bartiromo, and now former Fox Business host Lou Dobbs could meet the legal standard of claims being so inherently improbable that only a reckless person would have put them in circulation. Okay, so the ruling continues to say that there is a substantial basis for the claim and that at a minimum, Fox News turned a blind eye to the litany of outrageous claims about Smartmatic. And so now here comes Tucker Carlson, because in writing the decision, the judge decided to cite Tucker Carlson for the reasoning for this decision, okay? The fact that Tucker Carlson seemed to go in a different direction, believe it or not, compared to the other hosts. This is an exact statement from the judge here, Judge David Cohen from the New York Supreme Court. The statements of Tucker Carlson, perhaps the most popular Fox News host, militate most strongly in favor of a possible finding that there is a substantial basis that Fox News acted with actual malice. On November 19th, 2020, Lou Dobbs posted a video of how he and Powell on Twitter, with a caption stating that Powell has no doubt that Dominion voting machines run Smartmatic software, which allows it to manipulate the votes. That same day, Carlson wrote an article stating that for over a week, Powell had been claiming that the election had been stolen and that if Powell were correct, it would be the greatest crime in American history. And he thus asked her to substantiate her comments. However, Powell never provided the evidence requested by Carlson, and President Trump's campaign advised Carlson that it knew of no such evidence. So the fact that for once, Tucker Carlson was careful in how he covered a story, that was used against Fox News in this defamation lawsuit.
Yeah, so there's two ironies here. First of all, look, I think the press should have really wide leeway to say what they're gonna say, especially if you're doing opinion stories, etc. And so even at Fox News, I would defend those guys and their right to say what they're gonna say, especially if it's opinion, right? And by the way, they're right-wing grifters everywhere, grifters of all sorts. They're always threatening to sue us, okay? And they'll say it on the flimsiest things. I mean, you called me a liar when I was on tape lying. Yeah, because that's the news. That was a fact, and we showed the tape. There's no question about it. Like, yeah, I know, but it hurt my feelings, so I'm gonna sue you for defamation or whatever, right? And then you call them a liar because they're suing you, and they say, I'm gonna double sue you.
Right, and they do that, yes.
Yeah, and so if Fox News loses this, that might encourage some grifters to go, okay, now we're gonna get paydays, etc. right? But if this ain't actual malice, I don't know what is.
Right.
So if Fox News wins this case, then you can say anything about anyone. It doesn't have to be true at all. You can't trust anything in media. I mean, that's where we are now. The question is, what are the courts gonna say, right? Because there's no question they knew they were lying. There's no question that they did it repeatedly over and over again on a massive issue. And now the second irony is that Tucker Carlson for once told the truth and now they're using it against them. And so I'm like,
they're not using it against him, but they are using it against the other Fox hosts.
Yeah,
right?
And so there's that irony of like, well, I want to encourage them to tell the truth, and now the fact that they told the truth once in a sea of lies is going to hurt their case. I'm like, well, that's definitely ironic, right? Now, look, when Tucker wants to, that's why I always tell you, there's a lot of idiots in the world, and especially in the right wing, but Tucker ain't one of them, okay? when he wants to, he can make an excellent case, right? And so I remember covering that story when I was like, look at what Tucker Carlson is saying here. She's never produced one single piece of evidence. He's willing to have her on Fox News, right? Friendly territory, obviously you can see from the rest of Fox News. And she wouldn't come on because she would have to give him just one piece of evidence. And they never had it. And Fox News executives and hosts clearly knew they didn't have. We all knew it. We were all on the air together. You all saw it together. They saw what Fox News executives didn't see that Trump and his allies lost 60 court cases in a row and never presented one shred of evidence in any of those court cases, including the Trump-appointed judges.
They knew.
They definitely knew. This is as actual malice as it gets. So yeah, it'll create trouble for a lot of shows and channels and networks if someone actually loses a defamation case and this kind of suit against a new so-called news organization. But they're not news, they're propaganda. And so if they win, then there's no rules left at all. You can lie with impunity on things you know are false. You can say anything you want about any person in America, ruin their lives completely with actual malice and get away with it. Because if this ain't actual malice, they'll never be able to prove actual malice in any case.
Listen, the burden to win, like the burden of proof to win a defamation suit is incredibly high. Like it's a high standard, very high standard. In fact, the vast majority of defamation suits fail. The defamation suit that Sarah Palin had brought forth, I believe against the New York Times, failed. And it's because you have to prove actual malice. That is a difficult thing to prove. So the fact that this is going to move forward because the Supreme Court judge here sees that there is certainly reason to believe that there's actual malice is a big deal. And we'll see how it plays out. Again, this was just a decision in regard to allowing this case to move forward.
Yeah, last thing, look, as it was happening at the time, I couldn't believe Fox was allowing it. Because I know the rules very, very well. I run this network. We deal with it all the time,
Columbia
right?
Law School.
Oh, please, I do declare. Okay, and I'm like, wait, they're gonna lose billions of dollars. They're doing it again and again and again when it is absolutely clear that they don't have evidence and they're all lying on air. I couldn't believe they kept Lou Dobbs and Maria Bartiromo on air. I couldn't believe they'd have Giuliani and Powell on all the time. Sometimes Powell, but not on Tucker's show. Okay, so but I'll give ironic credit to Tucker here. He did once tell the truth, and now it might cost Fox News billions of dollars.
Yep. All right, let's take our final break. When we come back, we'll show you what it looks like to do banking while black.
Member comments first. Here's a fun handle. Anna's right though. That's just the handle.
Oh, thank you.
Okay, it didn't even get to the comment. It's just, that's the handle. Anna's right though. Okay.
You've already won. Okay.
They write in, I've been watching for about 7 years and finally ordered my first TYT shirt. Love the art and appreciate the fundraising and as always, the coverage. # support Ukraine.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, no problem. So guys, shoptyt.com has shirts supporting the Ukrainian movement. 100% of the profits go to razumforukraine.org. That's a human rights group helping Ukrainians. And so we're celebrating Sunflower Bay and the guy who told the Russian warship to do you know what. And I want to tell you about one other fun programming thing. TYT Army are volunteers who do an amazing job. They do research papers on policy positions. They're just an amazing, amazing crew. They fight back against media misinformation, etc. Now they're having fun. 16 top progressive policies, March Madness. Go to this Twitter handle at TYT Army 3, TYT Army 3, and play March Madness. See which policy is the top progressive policy. I kind of feel bad because I'm like, no, I love all those policies. I don't want to vote. I don't want to vote living wage versus gun control, but it does kind of, it's interesting. It almost clarifies your priorities. I'm curious how it's going to turn out. It wasn't our idea, it was their idea, but I love their initiative. Okay, so now back to the members. Joseph Knight wrote in, we have a pretty smart audience here. Love you guys. Joseph, that's totally true. It's empirical. I read the comments. You guys make excellent comments based on facts, interesting points and perspectives we hadn't thought of. I love doing this show with you guys. All right, more members. Naughtius Maximus. I guess Fox should have stuck with lying. They're really good at it. No, but seriously, that's why I'm saying, like, the fact that Tucker told the truth once proves that they knew. And the lesson they'll probably take from that is never tell the truth. Then they won't be able to tell that. They might think we're so stupid we can't tell what the truth is. But if we show them that we know what the truth is and then lie 99% of the time, then we're in trouble. All right, Suave Bronterock says, plaintiffs have already beaten the actual malice challenge. That was at the motion to dismiss stage and they've passed it. Fox News is in big trouble now. I mean, you want to talk about a smart audience. People writing in who are therapists and lawyers, etc., with specific expertise. Smartest audience in the world, I love it. Matt Gase on a white Bronco wrote in on Twitch saying, you know what made me happy this week? Having Francesca Fiorentini formally join the TYT network. I've been a fan of hers since the AJ Plus shows. I hope Cenk paid her his weight in gold.
Can I just say,
my weight in gold?
Francesca's such a, like, yes, she's talented, she's funny, she's smart, all of that. But you don't come across a lot of genuinely good people in this industry, and she's genuinely an incredible, kind person. I love Francesca.
Totally agree. Out of time. TYT.com/join, become a member, become part of TYT. Let's do this together. All right, back on TYT, Cenk, Anna, and Guest. Someone with a handle Guest just became a Young Turks member on YouTube by hitting the join button below. You guys can do it at TYT.com/join. Unfortunately, I don't have time for all the comments. You guys are amazing. Jeremy, Justice, Warren, McNeil, etc. You guys made terrific comments.
You guys, members only bonus episode today. I mean, we've been killing it lately, if I do say so myself. Today is also gonna be awesome. A lot of fun stories, people to dunk on. You don't want to miss it. TYT.com/join.
Brought to you by Dunkin' Donuts.
No.
One day when we dunk on them, they're probably not going to buy that. No. Okay, Dunkin' Donuts, we have this great idea where we just eviscerate Republicans and then we say we dunk on them. They're like,
no thanks. Thanks, but no thanks.
No donuts for us. All right, forward.
Let's do it.
Hey, sir. Hey, man. Do me a favor, man. Come this way. Whoa. Put your hand behind your back. Change now, back. Got it.
The man that you just watched get arrested in that footage is actually the director of the blockbuster film Black Panther. His name is Ryan Coogler, and he was just trying to withdraw some cash from his account until a teller assumed that he was actually trying to rob the bank and called the cops on him. And so he ended up getting arrested. Before we look at more of the footage, I do want to give you some more information, some more context about this situation. Coogler was detained and handcuffed after he went to Bank of America to make a transaction on January 7th, according to the Atlanta police. The 35-year-old director, who was wearing a hat, sunglasses, and a COVID face mask, went to the counter and handed the bank teller a withdrawal slip with the note written on the back that reportedly said, "I would like to withdraw $12,000 cash from my checking account. Please do the money count somewhere else. I'd like to be discreet." So let's pause for a second. If you're withdrawing a big sum of money like that in cash, understandably, you don't want people around you to hear that you're withdrawing that amount of money in cash. I mean, this is something my dad taught me since I was a kid. Like, don't count your money, period, in front of other people. Like, it's just not a good idea.
Literally happened to me today. I going to Vegas over the weekend, so I withdrew some money, nothing like what he withdrew, and I was nervous about it. Like, as they're handing me the money, imagine $12,000. Like, okay, let's count it out in front of everybody, right? So he hands him a note. But guys, this is so easy. He says, "Can you get it from my account?" Well, does he have an account or doesn't he? Why are you arresting him without checking to see if he has an account?
Yeah.
You guys, do you see how deep-seated the racist assumptions are? I don't know if that teller is like some weirdo, random, like vicious racist. No, she just sees a black man while he's wearing a mask. We're all wearing masks, this is during COVID, right? And he says, "Can you get money from my account?" "Oh, you're right, sure you do." "Okay, arrest him."
So let me give you more information about what happened. So according to Variety, the teller misinterpreted the situation as an attempted robbery when the amount of the transaction exceeded $10,000 and triggered an alert notification from Coogler's bank account. The teller then informed her boss that she suspected it was a robbery attempt, and together they called the police. 4 Atlanta Police Department officers arrived at the scene and detained 2 of Coogler's colleagues who were waiting for him outside the bank in a car with the engine running. And so we have body cam footage of not just of Coogler in custody, but he's trying to explain to the cops what's going on, so they let him go. Let's watch.
It's a medical assistant that works in my house that prefers to be paid in cash. Every time I make a withdrawal to pay her, because it's a large amount, she works a lot.
Yeah.
If I don't write down on a note how much I want out, and then I don't want it ran through the money counter right there at the desk, the whole bank ends up looking at me because they just hear the money going through the account, and I don't feel safe. I don't feel safe getting money out like that. So every time I go to withdraw it, I put the amount, the account I want it taken out of, and I put my own card in, and then they usually take me out like, "Oh, it's just get the money from."
Honestly, that video is so devastating to watch. Like, it's insulting.
Yeah.
Like, he's handcuffed. He has to explain to them what he's doing. I mean, it's pretty sick. Now, after verifying his identity and his bank account, the officers released him and his colleagues, and he explains to the cops what happened at the counter. We have that video. Do you want to go to that first, Cenk?
No, I just want to comment on that video we just saw, because so many in the black community and otherwise took tremendous pride that a movie about black empowerment did so well. And for so long, Hollywood wouldn't make movies with black stars or about black people because they thought, "Oh, well, that's not gonna sell." And it turned out it sold spectacularly. It was such a great success. He was nominated for an Oscar, but it doesn't matter. And that's what's so dispiriting. It just doesn't matter. So LeBron James buys a house in LA, they write the N-word all over the gate. And so a lot of times when black people are pulled over, they'll make the excuse of, "Well, it's the socioeconomic conditions. They weren't treated that way because they were black. They were treated that way because they're poor." But now here are rich black folks, and they're like, "Well, he was withdrawing so much money, and he had a couple of people waiting for him in the car because he's wealthy." Well, so you can't win. You can't win if you're poor and black. You can't win if you're rich and black. And I can't believe how calm he was. If it was me, I'd be screaming, "Do I have a goddamn bank account here or don't I? Go inside, check my goddamn account, and release me right now." Are you people insane?
You want him to get loud? You want him to get loud with the cops? I mean, we've seen how that plays out.
I know, and he can't because then they'll murder you. It's maddening, it's maddening.
Look, but honestly, Cenk, like, let me just say, I don't think the cops were in the wrong here, okay? The cops showed up after the bank teller and her boss alleged that there was a robber in the bank.
No, I hear you completely. On the bank, on the cops acting rashly, if he does get loud, that's just a general thing across the country, and you're putting your life in you're risking your life if you're black or brown, but mainly black. if you do what I said and like rightfully argue for your rights in front of cops, that you run a risk of being killed, right? So, but in this case, the real problem is before he gets handcuffed. Anna's right. The bank teller, hey, I mean, and the manager, idiot of idiots, check to see if he has an account. He just asked for $12,000 out of his own account. Why are you assuming every black person is a robber? Jesus Christ, what's wrong with you?
Yeah, I mean, just if you, I mean, he like you'd have to input and provide your account information to withdraw the money. If there's any suspicion that the person withdrawing the money isn't the person who owns the account, ask for ID. Like I just don't, it didn't need to get to this point, right? So it's pretty sick. And by the way, it's amazing. I mean, even after everything they put him through, he was insanely gracious about the situation. He says the situation should have never happened. However, Bank of America worked with me and addressed it to my satisfaction, and we've moved on.
It would have addressed it to my satisfaction if they gave him $1 million, okay? And then I'll move on, right? But look, kidding aside, I don't know the motivations of the manager and the teller at all, and I don't know their identity at all, right? I just know that systemically, in this country, we've put it into that poison into people's heads, into everybody's heads, white, black, brown, it doesn't matter, Asian, it doesn't matter. That hey, if it's a black person, they're suspicious. And that is so heartbreakingly unfair. And guys, if you're a right winger or you're white right winger, we're just asking you to have a tiny bit of empathy. And I know it didn't happen to you, so you think like, well, that doesn't sound right. It didn't happen to me. It didn't happen to anyone I know. I can't believe it. But there it is on video. It does happen because they look different than you. Can you just be human for a second and have your heart go out to them so that we could all fix this together? It's not too much to ask for.
All right, well, why don't we end with some fun, which is Donald Trump continuing to cry about windmills. Donald Trump has continued his weird obsession of windmills. Of course, he's been against windmills for personal reasons, which we'll get to in just a second. But in the latest episode in this saga, Trump is alleging that windmills might have something to do with why Russia invaded Ukraine. Let's watch.
Definitely wanted Ukraine, loved Ukraine, would never have happened.
What do you see happening next then? Because it seems like the tensions are high. How does this all end? Is this going to be like a long-term thing? How do you see it unfolding?
Well, and I said this a long time ago, if this happens, we are playing right into their hands, green energy. The windmills, they don't work. They're too expensive. They kill all the birds. They ruin your landscapes. And yet the environmentalists love the windmills. And I've been preaching this for years. The windmills, and I had them way down, but the windmills are the most expensive energy you can have, and they don't work. And by the way, they last a period of 10 years, and by the time they start rusting and rotting all over the place, nobody ever takes them down. They just go on to the next piece of prairie or land.
Wait, what does that have to do with how this war could escalate? Because that's what the question was. So like he immediately went to, you know what, you know what really grinds my gears? These damn windmills. They're hurting the beautiful view from my properties. That's what this is really about. He's been salty ever since windmills were erected in a place that he didn't like. So to give you those details, when Trump bought land in Scotland to build a golf course and resort, he opposed a plan to build wind turbines on the country's coast. I want to see the ocean. I don't want to see windmills, Trump said in 2006. Then in a speech to the Scottish Parliament in 2012, Trump went even further. I am an expert on tourism.
Of course you are.
If you dot your landscape with these horrible, horrible structures, you will do tremendous damage. Many countries have decided they don't want wind because it doesn't work without massive subsidies. It kills massive amounts of birds and wildlife, as if he cares about birds and wildlife. And there are lots of other reasons. By the way, speaking of killing birds and wildlife, what about your sons doing their little trips to various African countries to slaughter exotic animals?
Yeah, all of a sudden he cares about animals.
Yeah.
Get out of here. But to be fair to Donald Trump, once they did the windmills, no one went to Scotland anymore. Tourism fell off a cliff. Oh, right, that didn't happen. He's totally full of crap. He's obsessed with how it was going to affect the value of his golf property.
Exactly.
Of course. I have more hilarious windmill comments in a second, but keep going.
I feel like we should also give you examples of other dumb things he said about windmills in the past. Let's watch.
If you have a windmill anywhere near your house, congratulations. Your house just went down 75% in value. And they say the noise causes cancer. You told me that one, okay? You know, the thing makes it so, and of course it's like a graveyard for birds.
God, he's so dumb.
They say the noise causes cancer. You tell me that one. No, I can't tell you that one because you made that up out of your insane head. Come on, guys, Republicans, come on, come on. Do you really think the noise of wind causes cancer? Do you really believe that? You believe him over, now in this case, not 99% of the scientists in the world, 100% of the scientists. There isn't anyone who thinks wind or the noise from wind or the noise from windmills causes cancer. He just made up that outrageous, ridiculous thing out of nowhere. And he does it all the time, because why? He's obsessed with himself. Ukrainians are dying? Who cares? You know what happened to my Scottish golf property in 2012?
100%.
10 years ago, and he still hasn't let it go.
No.
They're dying in the streets, and they bombed a hospital. Well, let me tell you about my golf properties.
Insane.
I got one more quote for you on windmills. He said, I never understood wind. You know, I know windmills very much.
Nailed it.
But they're noisy. They kill the birds. This guy's the biggest bird lover in America. Okay, you want to see a bird graveyard? Go under a windmill someday. You'll see more birds than you've ever seen in your life.
The guy who doesn't believe in the climate emergency, which is killing, I mean, it's destroying the habitat for so many different types of animals. I mean, we have animals that are about to go extinct as a result of our carelessness, our unwillingness to do anything substantive in response to the climate emergency. But don't worry, Trump is concerned about the bird graveyards that are piling up in wind turbine areas across the country.
Of course. But he never understood wind, but he knows windmills very much.
Very much.
Okay, all right. But I realized at this late date, because we've covered the story a couple times, and this is just the latest version of him going on this rant. How did I miss it the whole time? He's Don Quixote. He's chasing after windmills. Okay, his name is even Don Quixote Trump. Okay, he's a character out of a novel. He's constantly fighting the windmills. They're like, okay, now what do you think we should do to fight the Russians who are killing the Ukrainians? No, we should fight the windmills instead. Literal, okay. For all these years, a third of the country at a minimum like worships a guy who is that mentally unstable.
Windmills.
Maybe that's the noise in his head. It's got the rest of us sick, that's for sure.
By the way, there's a ton of wind turbines in like the Palm Springs area. I don't hear anything. Like, where does the, what's the noise? Like, there's noise? Actually, what's a little creepy about them is there's no noise, right? Like, you see like these hills with like a ton of wind turbines and it's like super quiet. Kind of creeps me out.
No, they're the quiet killer. Spreading cancer everywhere with their wind noise. All right, speaking of noise, in the bonus episode for the members, Ted Cruz gets hilariously heckled. You'll love it, tyt.com/join, or if you're on YouTube, hit the join button below. We'll see you there in a minute.
Windmills.
Hey everyone, Matteo Scarapo here, author of Black Buck, which is Shop TYT's first fiction book ever. I'm honored. So, Black Buck is about a young man named Darren who's living in Bed-Stuy, Brooklyn. He lives with his mom, he has his girlfriend, he has his best friend, he has his neighborhood, and his neighborhood has him. Darren's also working at a Starbucks in Midtown Manhattan. And one day, this man, real suave and good looking, comes in and asks Darren to give him his regular. But for some reason, Darren says no. This man named Rhett Daniels, who's the CEO of a startup called Someone, located on the 36th floor of the same building, is impressed. And he invites Darren upstairs, and then he extends an offer to join his elite sales team. Darren reluctantly joins, and he soon realizes that he's not the only black salesperson there. He's the only black person in the entire company. So he goes through hell and back in order to make it to the top. And once there, he has status, money, power, but he says, you know what? I don't like being the token black guy. So he hatches a plan to help other people of color infiltrate America's tech startup sales teams, redefining what it means to be a minority in the workplace. This book definitely, if you couldn't tell, touches on many things that are relevant to this moment that we're all living in right now. But it's also connected to the many moments in history that have come before today. I hope that you read it. I hope that you enjoy it. And if you want to order a copy, go to shoptyt.com. Thank you, be well, and happy 2021.
Breaking news with Brett Ehrlich. This is Brett Ehrlich with breaking news with Brett Ehrlich. Bernie Sanders wants to break Wall Street, and he wants to break it real bad.
What's happening? I'm Rashad Rich, your host